Hopefully that's the last of us.
Yes.
Good morning. Today is November 2nd. It is approximately 8:39. We are, this is the Board of Behavioral Sciences. We are at the Embassy Suites on 400 North State College Boulevard in Orange, California. I'm calling the meeting to order. I'd like to have roll call and the establishment of quorum, please.
Good morning. Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Here.
Renee Launer.
Here.
Jonathan Maddox.
Here.
Max Disposti.
Here.
Samara Ashley.
Here.
Deborah Brown.
Here.
Betty Conley.
Here.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Here.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Here.
Christina Wong.
Here.
And Sarita Kohli is absent for the record. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to introductions, I'd like the board, if they would please introduce themselves. Starting, yes, with Roseanne.
Roseanne Helms, Legislative Analyst with the Board.
Renee Launer, LCSW member.
Christine Whitlisbach, I'm a public member.
Jonathan Maddox, I'm an LMFT member.
Max Disposti, public member.
Sabina Knight, legal counsel.
Deborah Brown, public member.
Kim Madsen, executive officer.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Christina Wong, LCSW member.
Steve Sodergren, Assistant Executive Officer of the Board.
Christy Berger, Regulatory Analyst for the Board.
At this time, if there's anyone from the audience that would like to come up and introduce themselves, you may. You don't have to.
Dean Porter, California Association for LPCCs.
Becca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California Chapter.
Janley Wong, NASW.
Ben Caldwell, AAMFT, California.
Thank you. And just for the record, Samara Ashley. We have one more.
You have, yeah.
Oh, we have one more. Sorry.
Sierra Smith, executive director of Open Paths Counseling Center.
I am Todd Pellegrino with the Therapist Development Center.
Gail Wilburn, Executive Director of the Southern California Counseling Center.
Marcy Kaplan, CEO of the Maple Counseling Center.
I'm Eden Garcia Bayless. I'm the Executive Director for Airport Marina Counseling Service.
Good morning, Wendy Biddledge, LMFT and self-made advocate.
I'm Sarah Livermore. I'm in the clinical training department at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology.
I'm Robin Anderson, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Pre-Licensed.
And just for the record, Samara Ashley. Oh. We were just introducing ourselves.
Good morning, Samara Ashley, public member.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have the chair report. There, to begin with, we have two resolutions for Karen Pines and Patricia Loft-Dawson, who are no longer on the board, and we had those to read today. However, unfortunately, they were not able to be with us today, so those will be sent off in the mail. We do appreciate all of the work that they did. Let's see. Anybody on the board have any news of any kind that they would like to share? Christina Wong, like where are you going in a couple weeks?
I got called out. I'll be attending the ASWB meeting in Atlanta with traveling with Kim.
Yeah. Okay, and what will we be doing there?
Attending the meeting.
Board business.
Board business, yes, pretty much. And a lot of networking, but at the same time, talking about
Day
probably
one, day two.
the mobility thing and, some of the national agenda items.
That's what I was looking for. We have established a new subcommittee, and in that on portability, and on that subcommittee, that is the reason that both of you will be attending that meeting.
Well, in addition, they also
present statistics about their national exams, so I'll be hearing that as well. Yes, also something we're looking at. Okay, anybody else on the board? I'd just like to say welcome to Jonathan Maddox. He is our newest board member, representing the MFT licensees, taking over the place for Karen Pines and her licensee. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And our very first board meeting, or his board meeting. Anything else? Anybody want to share anything? Okay, moving on. Kim?
Alrighty, so we'll move into the budget report. Currently, our budget for fiscal year 17-18 is just a little over $11 million. And the budget report looks a little different because on July 1st, the Department of Consumer Affairs, as well as other state agencies, transitioned to a new accounting system called FisCal. FisCal is a single management system that will allow the state to combine accounting, budgeting, cash management, and procurement activities. So one size fits all. And unfortunately, due to the transition to the new system, we are experiencing a delay in receiving our normal reports from the department in terms of our budgeting, our expenses, and our revenues. So the figures you see in the expense category broke down, as well as the expenditure report that I usually provide you, are based solely on our internal invoices. There's nothing there that is, you know, obviously we paid staff, because you see that's a zero so far. So, I mean, obviously nobody's working for free. So, in speaking with the department, my understanding is they're aware of the situation. They're working to get the reports. There will be reports that will be available to us that are similar to what we got before, but we're hoping to get them soon. So I expressed my concern because I would like it for the next board meeting, because the May meeting means we're at the end of the year, and from just a normal cash in, cash out basis perspective, makes me a little nervous to find out maybe at the end of the year that I go like, oh, in the red. I like to know ahead of time if that's going to happen. I don't anticipate that, but you know, that was just sort of my argument. So, however, the fund condition report is correct. We are reflecting a 5.9 month reserve. And in our general fund loans, you'll recall that initially we had $12.3 million out to the general fund in loans. Some of that has been paid, $6 million of that has been paid back. In the fund condition, you'll see that we are projected to get payments in the next 2 fiscal years. If those payments do occur, then all of our loans will be repaid. And I know that there will probably be a slight question about what happens in 2021 when we see a negative 1.8 months in reserve.
Right.
That, as you'll recall, I may have mentioned at our last meeting that technically we are structurally imbalanced, meaning we take in less than we spend, although I tend to, we always revert money back. So what this figure represents is our need to do a fee audit so that we don't run into a negative situation. So at the end of this fiscal year, late spring, early part of next year, we'll send out a contract proposal and request bids to conduct a fee audit. And they will, the fee audit entails an analysis of all the activities that we do and measuring them up to the fee to make sure that we are charging appropriately. So I would expect some kind of adjustment for our fees. I don't know whether they're going to go down. I don't know whether they're going to go up, but
I'm guessing not down.
I'm thinking not down. So, you know, I mean, if you look at a classic example, the LPCC application is far higher than any of the other applications. And so I can see some adjustments, you know, on both sides, but we'll wait and see what the fee audit bears out. So are there any questions about the...
So it will start, the fee audit will start next spring?
Yeah, we'll do a request for proposals next spring, and then we'll bring in the firm that has awarded the contract, and then they'll sit with us and they'll look at everything that we do, down to picking up the phone, to moving paper from one desk to next desk. They'll look at staff time. It's just a very comprehensive analysis of our activities in relationship to what we're charging.
So when's the last time we have a fee audit?
I wouldn't know. Yeah, as far as I know, I don't think the department, our board has ever had one. I know that, oh gosh, I think mid-2000s, we exceeded the statutory limit of a 24-month balance in reserve. And so at that point, fees did come down briefly. And then fees, I don't know if they went back up or if they just stayed at that same level. So, but it's time.
It's about time. I think that's
Yeah,
time.
and I've known that this is coming for a while, but I really wanted to wait until our exam. We've had so many transitions and revisions to our program and our operations that I really wanted to wait until things really settle down so that we can have a more accurate analysis of what we're doing. Statistics, we've included the first quarter statistics for your review. In the licensing program overall, the application volumes increased. That's not surprising, that's following graduation, so those are not surprising. We're up 15%. And, you know, as a result of those increased applications, our processing times did increase a little bit from the last quarter. But if you look, other than the MFT clinical exam, most everything is getting done in 45 days, most of it being under 30. And the MFT rise in those processing times is directly related to the vacancies that we have in that unit. We have 2. And then onboarding new staff and training. So happy to say we're fully staffed now in that unit as of yesterday. So things will be returning to a little more normal.
Why does the LCSW exam take so much longer than the LEP or LPCC?
They're still looking at hours, and again, when we have people absent or vacancies, we're appropriately staffed for the volumes that we get, but if one of those positions vacates, then it really skews our processing times. We issued 1,286 brand new licenses. And as of September 30th, we have over 110,000 licensees and registrants total. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So business is good. The next thing I will talk people want ideal people. I like it. The exam program I'm going to talk about at the end of this report because we have some additional information. The administrative program, if you look, we received 9,695 applications in the first quarter, and that's an 11% decrease since the last quarter, and that figure does not include renewal activity. Renewals, we had over 15,000 people renew, and I'm happy to say that it's almost half are using the online renewal feature, so that's really diminishing staff time for renewals because we're only having to process 3% of those applications. And DCA is still, doing about half their central cash sharing. For our enforcement program, we received 303 consumer complaints, 305 criminal convictions. We closed 668 cases. We referred 57 cases to the Attorney General's office. And of those cases, we filed 17 accusations, 8 statements of issue. And our final citation number is 78. Our average number of days to complete formal discipline in the first quarter is down. This is basically the performance measure 4 standard, and it measures the time the board receives the complaint and all the time until it's final. So that performance measure goal is 540 days. We were able to get it down to 669 days. The previous quarter was 880 days, and this is I think reflective of us having 2 analysts dedicated to just do what I call nag the dad. Where's our stuff? But anyway, they're on top of it. Yeah. They got to keep things light in the office. Now, if we want to look at the time that it stayed from the time the board refers it to the AG's office to the time the AG finishes, we are looking at 447 days. In the previous quarter, we reported 469 days. So we're seeing some movement, which is good. I think part of it is also that the Attorney General's office are staffing up as well to handle increased volumes. And overall, if you combine our investigations and such, you're looking at 166 days to complete, which is well under the 180. So, CE audits continue to be robust. From July to September, we've audited 692 licensees that have renewed. We're still at a 27% fail rate. And the reason for failing the CE audit is consistent. They haven't completed the required coursework in the renewal period. They didn't complete the first-time course requirements during the renewal, like the HIV/AIDS coursework or law and ethics, or if they took from unapproved providers. So I recently attended the LAP conference and spoke to the attendees there, and we really talked about the importance of CE, what's required, what you need to do in an effort to improve compliance. We're continuing to update our website with links to where you can find approved providers. So hopefully we'll see those numbers go down.
Is that 66? I mean, that's just still mind-boggling. Is there a pattern to that particular license, the LEP license?
Yeah, it's the law. They're missing law and ethics or the first-time renewal requirement for coursework.
So that's the consistent
error. That's the consistent error. Okay. And that's what I stressed during the conference. If you do nothing else, law and ethics every year. So, and I gave them some tips on how they could fulfill that, like being a subject matter expert. So.
And it's not every year, it's every renewal.
It's every renewal period. So the renewal period is for 2 years.
Yeah. So it's just, because if they have to take it twice, we'll get it.
Yeah, it's just the renewal period.
I know.
The summer months tend to be a little lighter in our outreach activities. We had some consortium meetings that staff attended either physically or via telephone. I attended the National Board of Certified Counselors annual delegate meeting. NBCC is the entity that administers the national exam for our licensure for LPCCs here in California. Heard, their statistics, talked about their exam. Again, that entity is developed a proposal for portability that we'll talk about at Friday's meeting. So very good conference, and I'm always astounded when I go to that conference how many states are not fingerprinting. I'm just flabbergasted. But so that was that, and then board staff is working with the Board of Psychology and the Medical Board to revise the Professional Therapy Never Includes Sex brochure. This is a legislatively mandated brochure that we have to develop. It has not been updated since the 90s. Obviously, perspectives have changed, and so we are revising it to address the current perspective. Our next meeting to review the draft of that brochure is December 7th in Sacramento, and I'm going to invite any of our licensee members that would like to attend that meeting to provide your perspective on the brochure. You would be welcome to do so.
So December 7th is a Thursday.
Is it a Thursday? So can you come?
I can.
Yay! Okay. It's in Sacramento. The meeting is at 1 p.m. You know that, so I can send you the. Is there any other licensee that would like to attend?
I'll consider that.
John? Okay. Jonathan?
Am I looking to it? I need to find some schedule.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll forward the meeting invite to board members, and those that have the ability to attend, just let me know. Because they wanted subject matter experts, but since this is coming from the board, I really would like the board members' insight.
So you just want the license, not the public members?
I'm okay with public members too, because I think everybody comes with a different perspective. The licensee has that practice perspective, and not that the licensees don't have the consumer protection perspective, but it's more, the public really can provide, I would say, a very detailed insight from public protection. So, I mean, obviously, we want this brochure to be with our licensees when they're treating. We want the brochure to reflect what to do. The current brochure doesn't necessarily guide the victim in that situation. So I think we need that balance. So, yeah.
So you just send it out to everybody to?
I'm going to send it out to everybody, and I think maybe, I would probably ask that we cap it at 2 licensees and 2 public members. Because we're also going to be in the room working with representatives from the medical board and the psychology board. So everyone's going to want that piece of the pie, so. But yes, definitely. And if we get to 5, I'm not going to say, no, cap limit, 5 can come.
So just to clarify, this meeting, we would have an opportunity to offer feedback and
Yes.
thoughts to actually inform the actual document?
Yes, actually, yes. Our first cut at it was to eliminate the outdated perspectives. If you read the document, it almost suggests that, it sort of tells the individual, yeah, stop going to that person, go seek somebody else, but it doesn't tell them how to heal. And it's just a very outdated perspective, and I think we need to bring, so we've taken out a lot of the language, and we've updated the language to reflect a more accurate perspective. And you'll hear later that Roseanne will present to you some, we're going to collaborate with the Board of Psychology on revising what the legislative mandate has. So yes, we do want feedback. That's the purpose of the meeting.
Do you have any sense of whether or not it takes into consideration the technological advances of having cell phones and pictures? And
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, and it didn't before. So, and then I'm going to circle back to our exam program, because given some of the comments in recent months, I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this. So Steve and I are going to be tag teaming on this. But overall, the program, we've administered 6,123 exams. The statistics there will give you the pass rates by the quarters. We conducted 12 examination workshops to develop the exam from July to September. Last March, we initiated a recruitment for subject matter experts to help develop the exam. We received 336 applications, and we approved 231 as meeting the requirements. And so total now, to develop all of our exams, we have 434 subject matter experts to participate in the various workshops. Subject matter recruitment is always ongoing, so anyone that's interested in participating in that, and you're a licensee, we encourage them to apply. There's an application on our website. We're even looking for folks who've been licensed 5 years or less, which is to provide some balance. The exam unit also recently developed a law and ethics examination FAQ, which will be going up on the website. And a copy of that is at the end of this packet for your review. These FAQs were developed primarily based on the questions that we consistently get that should be answered. So we thought an FAQ would be helpful. And now I'm going to defer to Steve, and he's going to do a follow-up to our exam program based on comments we received at the last board meeting.
Yes, hi. Good morning. The last board meeting, we had a presentation by OPES to talk about, they really discussed how they develop exams and such. Before I get into this report, just as an overview to make sure everybody understands the changes that were made during the exam restructure. Sorry if this is going to bore some of you, since you've probably been over this ad nauseum. But in 2016, we had the exam restructure. Before that time, we had 2 tests that were required for licensure. We had an LMFT standard written exam. That was a 175 multiple choice question exam taken over 4 hours. The second exam that the candidates took was a clinical written vignette. And that test was designed with, it was 5 to 6 vignettes with each one of those had 4 or 5 responses to answer, multiple choice. Came up to be about 40 questions, and I believe 30 questions, I'm sorry, and that was a 2-hour test. Those were the two tests before the exam restructure. One of the big things that changed with the exam restructure also was the time frame in which candidates actually took the exam. Before the exam restructure, a candidate would actually have to have their hours of experience, their coursework, and everything approved by the board before they even got into the exam pathway. Now, with the two new exams, those people actually, the candidates have to take the exam while they're interns before they even have their hours, unless you're out of state. So here goes, a normal, regular candidate does not have to have their hours approved. They just have to have an intern number to be able to take the law and ethics exam. In fact, it's a requirement for renewal on the intern. Once they're done collecting their hours, then they apply for the clinical. So now we have two different exams that went into place in 2016. It's split up into the law and ethics exam, which is a 75 multiple choice question exam given over 90 minutes. And then the other one is the LMFT clinical, which is a 150 multiple choice question exam. That's given over 4 hours. Well, there has been concern raised since 2016. There has been a decrease in the passing rate on the LMFT clinical. Totally recognize that. Honestly, it was from, I believe, I don't have the exact stats, it's in the paperwork here, but from a 90% down to a couple months ago, it was down to about 56%. But actually has gone up a little bit since this last month. I think it's like at 60-something%. So we do recognize that there was a decrease in the exam pass rates. Well, it's not hard to recognize. We see it right there. We see the stats. So that being said, though, the clinical exam, in my opinion, is psychometrically sound. It's legally defensible. I'm not concerned with the exam itself and the way it's constructed. And in an effort, because it is a concern, my concern is, first of all, why were we having those 90% pass rates? And we can also address looking at, too, why there is 60% really a good pass rate. We will continue to look at the statistical information and kind of try to delve into that. And I think with the follow-up, it's really, the exam is a very confidential, the development of exams and the validation of it should be confidential. So as to not, jeopardize any of that. I like to be as transparent as possible, and I think this board does like to be transparent as possible, but what the plan is from here on is we are going to continue to investigate, this swing in percentage pass rates, looking at the exam, and I think what we'll do is bring it back to the board, whether it's going to be a closed session. I don't know how we go about that, but bring what we find and concerns that may be, that may be voiced by stakeholders and see where the board wants to go with that. Because it's something that it's good to discuss publicly, but it's really, in the end, it's the board that has to be comfortable with the exam and how it's developed. So that's a little background. This report that you have in front of you, our exam manager, Gina Bayless, put it together. Really good report. It basically describes pretty much what OPES went over last time. OPES is the Office of Professional Examination Services. They are the exam developers for DCA, and we use them to produce our law and ethics exams and our LMFT clinical exam. They use basically the same standards that all national exams and that national exams use. If you read further down in the examination development, Kim was talking about SMEs. The way we develop exam is not just OPS develop the exams. They actually rely on the subject matter experts, which are licensees that we get in there to do workshops. And the subject matter experts perform a variety of different services and there's different workshops. And you'll see the listing of the workshops there. Each of those workshops usually take about 2 to 3 days, and they're separated, and it's not the same subject matter experts that are in each workshop. So the first thing they do is the occupational analysis, really looking at what is the skills and abilities that a licensee should have to be able to perform their job, appropriately. The next the next workshop is the item writing. They'll take time to create actual questions. And item review, then they will review those questions in a group. Then finally is using those questions to actually construct a whole exam. And then finally, the big thing is they will actually go through each question And I believe they operate on a process of actually taking the exam and kind of go through it and then discuss what they've came up with. And so it's a really good process. It's a process that's followed by, I think, most like national exams and such. So there's been questions about the passing score. It's a criterion reference methodology that's used. And when they're looking at the scores, they take into various factors. They look at what, let me just read through here. The report's nicer than what I'm going to babble out, so let me. So they use the criterion reference methodology. There's various what they look at is various factors that contribute to minimal acceptable competence for practice. They look at the difficulty of the issue addressed in each examination question, and they look at the implications of that issue for public health and safety. So each question really, I think the way I always look at it, each question has a certain weight, certain point scale. We've had some confusion in the past of when we've been posting the actual pass rates, people don't understand that each pass rate is distinct for that exam. They look at the questions, and the questions really derive the pass rate. So one exam can vary from another, and we put in here usually it can range from a 1 to 10 point difference between each exam administration. It's not a good way to, looking at the pass rate is not a great way to study, I would say. I mean, it doesn't help the candidates and actually cause more confusion for them than anything. So we have been in the habit of posting the pass rates. We are not going to do that from now on.
You mean rate or score?
Score, sorry, score, pass score. Let me talk about pass score. Yeah, pass rates will still continue to. Thank you.
Yeah, the rates will continue.
The rates will continue. The score will not. Am I missing score all the time? Sorry, I apologize. So the other part of the report is the examination statistics. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. Looking at basically historical. It's hard to do the historical, evaluation of exams because they're all different. But I know what I'm kind of looking at is the standard written is the closest I can come to comparing apples to oranges. I mean, it's basically, as you can see in that chart, the same content areas, almost the same construct. So we're going to be looking at that, seeing why there are similar pass rates, not pass scores, pass rates to the MFT standard written than there is to currently the clinical vignette. Don't know if that means anything. That's something we'll explore. And the other thing we're looking at too is the national pass rates. AAMFTB exam has similar pass rates currently to what we are experiencing with the clinical. That doesn't explain still the large pass rate in 2016, but it does give me more confidence that maybe this is truly what the pass rate should be. Pass rate? No, pass score. Pass rate, yeah. I just haven't checked myself, sorry. So, I have put, Gina's put in here are some of the statistical information we're looking at. So, in conclusion, what we're going to continue to do is review the data, review different data sets. We're going to be looking at validating some data to make sure. Gina's already began this process. With the changeover to Breeze, some of the data might be, we have to make sure that the data converted properly. So we're making sure that, first of all, that those statistics or those numbers are correct. We're going to be reviewing that data. Like I said, then maybe we'll bring that back to the board, maybe in a closed session. I don't know what the avenue is to discuss that, to see, what the board's pleasure is, to say if we want to say we like the exam, which I'm hoping. I think it's probably, I don't see anything wrong with it, or where we want to go from there. The other thing that we're doing on a side kind of note, we're going to be looking at ways to help the candidates, better prepare for the exam. Like you said, we have, not only are we doing like the frequently asked questions for the law and ethics, we are seeking to have practice exams, and anything that, may arise, we're going to try to be more helpful in that event. And lastly, I'm going to keep encouraging SMEs to get involved, because really the exam is developed by the licensees. So, I mean, the bigger pool we have, I think the more confidence, we can have in that exam is really testing the minimum competencies of the licensee. So,
just a
question?
couple of things. For the record, Sarita Kohli is present. You'd introduce yourself, please?
I'm so sorry to be late.
That's okay.
I'm Sarita Kohli. I'm the LMFT member.
Thank you. And just for order, I know Dr. Caldwell, you would like to speak on this, but I think, I know Ms. Mattson has some follow-up comments, and then I'd like the board to be able to ask questions, and then I'll open it up to the public. Okay, thank you.
I just want to touch briefly, without getting into too much the confidentiality aspect of the exam, but I'd like to take the board members back to when we transitioned first into the new exam. We were testing candidates. Remember that prior to the change, candidates had to earn their hours to qualify for both of the exams. The very first exam candidates took was the standard written exam. If they had passed that exam, we gave them credit for passing the law and ethics exam, so they moved right back into the second clinical exam. So, and we stopped examining all candidates November 30th. So December was an exam-free time, so we could transition and upload the new exam.
Mm-hmm.
For ease of transition, we did not make any of those candidates wait the 160 or the 180 days that we used to make them wait. We started everybody off with square one, fresh slate, to enter the exam cycle January 1. That meant if you took the exam, the standard written in November, you got to go right back into the exam January 1. And the two exams that we combined to make the current exam was the clinical vignette and the old standard written. So those questions were merged, and think of it as scrambled eggs. We put the exam together. That's the exam people took. So looking at that pool has already been exposed. Those pool of candidates already got to see either the standard written, definitely the standard written, but possibly the clinical vignette. So that, I think, really contributes heavily, along with the low numbers that tested those first 6 months, to the high pass rates, because they did not have to wait that required time period. So essentially, in testing standards, they're going to say that those questions were overexposed. So still a valid exam, still prepared correctly, still assessing minimum competence, but I think that is really indicates why the pass rate was at 90, why the pass rate was at 80. And when OPES first pointed out the 90% pass rate to us, they were very alarmed. We weren't, because I don't like to see a 90% pass rate, because from a testing perspective, that makes the exam too easy. You're not assessing for minimum competency to enter the profession safely. But we explained what that candidate pool looked like to OPS, and we all agreed that we would watch the next administration of the second exam. You saw that come down to 80%. Okay, a little more comfortable, not exactly thrilled with 80%, but you could see it was trending down and not up. You get to the latter half of the year, and then the first part of 2017, especially in 2017, you're starting to see a more normalized population. People who have taken the law and ethics now, who have had to go in and gather their hours, and are now coming into they're seeing that standard written or the clinical exam for the first time. There's been no exposure. So, and then having sat through not only how our exam is developed, and looking at how AMFTRB develops their exam and what is shared with me in closed session there, as well as NBCC. This is normal when you go to a new exam administration, and the pass rates are going to be high, and then they go low, and then they start to normalize. So knowing that we all do it the same, I'm with Steve. This was just sort of a anomaly.
Yeah, and that's what I try. I think the anomaly, like you said, maybe it was overexposure. I also think that the type of with the BRE system, how we had to process eligibilities. There was a certain candidate that was going over that, like you said. I mean, these are the people that were geared up to take the test really quick, and then we had a big population of people that were really holding off to take the exam to just make sure to see. So there's a lot of factors, I think, but I think it was an anomaly. I don't want to use, I hate the word anomaly, but it is normal. I think right now what we're realizing is a normalization of the data and the candidates and such.
Okay. Do you guys have any other thing before I open up to the board? All right, Sarita?
I just wanted to know what normal means. I mean, when we're saying normalize and it's getting normalized or it's being normal, is it against what norm or nationally?
I was looking nationally is what I'm looking at as norm. I mean, it's like I said, the AMFT RB, which is the clinical exam for the LMFTs. It's mirroring those statistics right now. The only other one I can really compare it to is the standard written that we had before, because I was saying that's 150 questions. It's kind of the same construct, some of the same, I mean, it's definitely the same content areas. The pass rates, we're starting to, although we had it reported in, I think the stats, it started at 77%, they were starting to hit a 65% pass rate. So I think that's where I'm looking at the two, comparisons. So.
And part of the normal also means you're looking at candidates that are coming through the new cycle with their previous exam experience. They started at the law and ethics, they moved on to get their clinical hours, and now the clinical hours have been submitted, and now they're ready for the clinical exam. So that's more, but previously you were looking at people, all the hours were in, and that's all that, the hours is what got them into the exams in the first place, and we have shifted that now. So I think we're seeing more of a popular candidates that are coming through the exam cycle for that second exam now is what the exam restructure was designed to do.
So according to OPS or any other exam testing service that we've used, do they consider a 60% or 65%? What is that percentage?
That they consider that normal. I mean, it's a valid exam in that it's measuring the minimum competency. The candidate takes that question and answers it either correctly or not correctly.
I guess my question is, what is that percentage which is considered normal? 60, 50, 70?
I think if it starts creeping up at 70, a little above 70, people get a little nervous. The psychometricians get a little nervous about that. They like things under 70%.
And I don't know if they have a percentage necessarily. I think they look. I mean, that's an indicator that.
It's an indicator.
So if they swing in percentages, then they'll go, wait a minute, let's look at the exam. What are we seeing on each exam question?
Right.
What's the performance? And so they'll see, and if the performance, for some reason, they're saying, we've tested these, and the performance, that question is performing what we think it's how it should perform, that if it's a 30% pass rate, then we need to look at the candidates to see what's going on in the, in the preparation for exam. I mean, do they have the knowledge? Or then we'd go back and maybe look.
If it's a 30%, they need to look at candidates
Well,
rather than
not necessarily candidates, but they would have to look at the construct and look at what are we testing? I mean, they look at the questions.
Yeah.
Ongoing, what happens is with each exam administration, they look at the passing rank, they look at each question to see if it's performing as it's intended. If they see a high number of candidates selecting the wrong answer, that indicates that there is something wrong in that question, whether it's phrased incorrectly or it's just a poor question. And so they pull that question out and they start looking at it. If they determine that that question is just not doing what it's supposed to do, that question is not scored. So the candidate is not adversely affected, but they do that. That's part of the ongoing analysis with every administration. So it's not necessarily the candidate population, but it's more the questions and how they're performing. And it's not unusual to pull questions out during an administration of a version of an exam because it's not doing well.
Peter had his, and then Leah.
Thanks, Kim, for the explanation about the discrepancy. This is the first time I kind of get a sense that it might be okay, because I'm quite concerned, like Ben, with such discrepancy in the passing rate. But what I want to ask Steve is that, do we have the raw scores? I'm thinking about conducting statistical analysis of two samples. Sample one is the people with the high passing rate, and then if we know the average score, the raw score, like what percentage of the questions they got correct, if we have that average, and then compare to the second sample, which is the new test that people only have a passing rate of 60% or whatever, and see what the score is, like how many questions they answer correctly. I know it's more complicated than that because obviously each question is kind of weighted, but we can still normalize the weighted questions, each multiple choice question, and compare those two average score. I'm not talking about passing rate, but I'm talking about the score, the number of percentage question they got correct. And then we can easily conduct statistical tests, student t-tests, and compare those scores and see whether it occurred by chance, like you're rolling a dice, you roll it 10 times, doesn't have to come out with 5 head, 5 tails, but whether it's within a statistical limit. And I think that's one of the first things we might be able to do. And that is assuming the samples are comparable. But what Kim is saying that the samples are not comparable, yeah, but still, it would be, get some idea. Doesn't matter how you cut it. It still doesn't explain how you set the passing rate that someone would, one test would get a 90% passing rate. How many questions they got correct in order to get a 90% passing rate? So that part I'm still not sure, even given the fact that they might be different samples.
Okay. We can always pull data. I think that maybe what would be the best route for that is to consult with OPES to see if they can do a closed session meeting. And they'd be able to delve deeper into that, because they probably have documentation they can show us exactly. So
We can have, the next meeting's in Sacramento, so we could bring up OPES and we can schedule a closed session.
Yeah, and they
get
can
more in-depth about that type of information.
Yeah.
Leah?
It was more to elaborate on what you were talking about, Kim, with evaluating each question. So it's fresh on my mind because I just gave a test yesterday and scored it. And what I like to look for is that every question somebody missed, but I'd like less than half my people to miss any one question. If more than half my people missed a question, then I got to evaluate, is it just a good discriminator, or is it too hard, or it wasn't, whatever. Is there something flawed in the process with that question? So like a good test would have, and I know they throw out the questions that a certain percentage of people miss. So a good test has a lot of questions where a bunch of people missed them, but it's never the same people.
Correct.
So that's how you get at those kind of numbers.
Correct.
So I'm also wondering, what sort of other data do we have about the applicants that would maybe inform what the pass rates, who's passing and who's failing, with maybe regions of the state where they live, access to resources, or racial backgrounds, or like who's passing and who is not, because I think that's also an issue that we should consider just in terms of equity for people. Not that we would necessarily change the test, but in creation of resources to support people to adequately prepare.
Right.
I think that would really inform that piece too. So I don't know if that exists.
Well, we do the only data that we really do post, and I don't think there's more than this we can post, is the school pass rates. So that will.
Particular schools they attended?
Yes.
You could still collect data on race, ethnicity, and their self-identified social class and not report it, but have OPES evaluate to see if the people who are often disenfranchised continue to be.
But I think that stuff it's voluntary usually. So I mean, I don't know if you would get. Honestly, it's an interesting idea, but I think because it's voluntary, you might not get.
Oh, I think you would.
So,
but I mean, when someone applies for a registration, they have. I mean, not they have to. I'm wondering, are they expected to put their racial background?
No, not even male, female either. No. And so yeah,
just your name.
Just your name. That's all we need to know. But we do post the school reports, and I mean, we're looking into that a little bit more too, and it's the pass rates for that. The other thing that I'm looking at is not necessarily something that we'll post, but on those, on the 2016 and stuff, is really looking at the candidates that were coming through, like we were talking about. Let's see how many of those that took that exam that first 90 days, how many of those were truly like the first time test takers, and like what was their time from being out of school to taking the exam, and looking at that kind of information too. So
one thing, because I'm actually not finished, so maybe one thing we can consider maybe in conversation at some point is, one, how much actual data we have for people who have self-identified, and really look at the stats to really figure out, is there an equity issue here that's impacting pass rates? And then two, I'm wondering if we could at some point maybe have a conversation about, and I don't know if there's some legal mandate that precludes us from asking, but maybe consider doing that just to see, because I think there are inequities that exist that impact people that people really don't want to talk about, and I think not talking about it is a disservice to the ones who are impacted by it.
I'm going to, Jonathan, I think make a very good point, because I have been in conversations with other entities that offer exams. At the beginning of that exam, the testing vendor has a survey, and they self-identify the candidate, talks about, various factors that, brought them to where they are today. And I think that we could probably consider incorporating that as we look at new exam vendors to administer our test, because I think that would be good information as well, and maybe we adjust how we present the exam and information and background materials.
we actually are already with not OPS, with PSI though. We are looking at the just currently, it wasn't for that per se, but looking at the initial survey that they offer, putting other stuff in there to help us with why are people, failing the exam, looking at how they prepared, looking at, if maybe their years of practice or years of internship or something. So we could possibly, we're already looking at that. So that'd be, we can explore that.
Leah?
And just as you consider comparisons among schools, I've been doing site visits lately, and some private institutions have the resources to bring in test experts who develop exams for those students and do full test prep courses to get them ready to take these exams. And they are some of the people who do the exam prep that you can go to the websites or whatever. So there's they have the financial resources to give that. So we don't want to assume that pass scores are correlated to quality of education when those schools who have the resources to it's more a reflection of privilege, possibly a reflection of privilege, I think. So I just want you to know that exists. They have people come in and they're developing exams and prepping them and getting them ready for it.
Just to tag on to that, we now have the option for EL to have extended time. Finally, it took 3 years, but we finally got it. And so in light of that and resources, Christy, you said that there were lots of people calling for those applications. So that's really good news, that there was probably a population that wasn't willing to come forward and say they needed that resource that now we're able to offer. So Stephen, if OPES could also follow that group to make sure, or not to make sure, we don't know that, to look at the extension of time, is that a resource that's actually helping that community of people? So instead of just putting it out there, I'd like to track it and see if we actually did something for those people.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, to the public, Dr. Caldwell.
Good morning, Ben Caldwell, AMC California. First of all, thank you for returning to this issue today. It's the source of a great deal of concern for a lot of people, so it's certainly worthy of some additional discussion. Just as a reminder, for the first half of 2017, 56% of first-time examinees passed the MFT clinical exam. The test is designed to assess one's ability to practice independently without being a danger to the public. So the inference that was sort of confirmed by Tracy Montez at the August meeting is that if 56% are passing, then 44% of those examinees taking the test for the first time are not safe for independent practice. That is a number that does not pass the most basic of smell tests. It has what researchers would call poor face validity. When we talked about this in August, there were two questions at play. One, why the pass rate is so low, and two, why did it fall so much so fast between late 2016 and early 2017? Kim, Dr. Chu, several others of you, I think, raised some good hypotheses at that meeting about reasons why those two things might be occurring. I tested some of those. I'll come back to that in a moment. The memo that's in front of you, though, not only fails to answer those questions of why, it doesn't even ask them. There is no meaningful analysis of any possible explanation for why the pass rate is so low and why it fell as much as it did, as quickly as it did. I want to add some historical context. The MFT clinical first-time examinee pass rate for the first half of 2017 wasn't just a blip. The pass rate for that period was not just a little, but a lot lower than any other 6-month period reported in your own data for the past 10 years. I was talking with Steve by email in advance of this meeting, and he said, please, no PowerPoints. I said, fine, no PowerPoints. Can I have at least a chart? Can I have a chart? And I have a chart. This is the last 10 years of your MFT exam data in 6-month chunks, and it shows just how unusual that first half of 2017 really is. The next lowest first-time examinee pass rate for a 6-month period over that time, over those 10 years, was 68%. That is statistically a massive difference given the sample sizes that we're talking about here. So the current pass rate is, even from an historical perspective, deeply unusual. There was some discussion during the report about sort of what's a common pass rate. I think it's important to draw a distinction between a more normal pass rate that includes every examinee, which is going to be a little bit lower, versus a normal pass rate for first-time examinees, which you can see from the historical data here is typically in the 70 to 80% range.
I'm sorry, could you just break out what these last few letters after MFT stand for? I know a couple of them, SWE.
Yeah, sorry. So you see the two lines that go up to the end of 2015. Those represent the previous MFT standard written exams, that's SWE.
Okay, standard written.
And the previous written clinical vignette, that's WCV. And then for the exams since then, you have the MFT Law and Ethics, and then the MFT California Clinical Exam, which is the one we're concerned about.
Thank you.
To the degree that I could, I did go and test some of the hypotheses that were raised at the August meeting. Kim had hypothesized that perhaps longer-term registrants were dragging down that pass rate, which is a reasonable hypothesis. You know, the longer somebody's been out of school, the harder it might be for them to retain that information. Your own 2008 data set suggests that actually the correlation goes the other way, that longer-term registrants needed fewer attempts on average to pass their licensing exams. Now that's 2008, that's 10 years ago, we're talking about different exams now, but that's the best available data that we have. A couple of you suggested that examinees were getting poor guidance from the test prep companies. So I asked them and their customers. And for all 4 of the major test prep companies, they do not encourage examinees to read items multiple times, precisely because they know that would take too long. They tell people to read carefully, but not to reread exam items. Also, none of them meaningfully changed their guidance at the end of 2016 in advance of the significant drop in pass rates. Dr. Montez said in August, pretty simply, it's the examinees. And we do know that there's one trait that is probably meaningfully changing about that examinee pool. We're now seeing graduates of the new 2012 curriculum finishing their experience and come through the testing process. Wouldn't it be helpful to know whether that new curriculum correlates with this drop? It is the only trait of the examinee pool, given the size of that pool, that is likely to be changing enough from one cohort to the next to potentially account for the drop. Now, I understand that you all as board members may or may not agree with me that there is a problem here. I think there is, you might not. But I hope that at least some part of you is asking, why is Ben the one bringing us this data? Why isn't this coming from OPES? You know, if, as Tracy said in August, if this kind of data sets off alarm bells at their end, why weren't they at the February meeting saying, hey, there's potentially a problem here? Why are we now in November talking about the same thing that has now been a problem for 11 months? Why are we not even bothering to ask why this pass rate is as low as it is and why it fell so far so fast? To that end, I'd like to make two specific requests of the board. And I don't know whether these require formal board actions versus just things that you know, maybe I'm in communication with Steve about. But the first is an opportunity that Kim, I think you raised a meeting or two ago, and that is to accelerate the next MFT occupational analysis. Given both the changes in curriculum since the last occupational analysis and the improvements made in the development process for the MFT national exam, it would be prudent to determine whether the practice of MFT in California has significantly changed and to reassess whether it's finally time to transition to the national exam as you have done for the other professions that you govern. Secondly, I'd like to request the publishing of some specific data so that I and other academics can help as best we can with some of the analytic legwork that seems like it's necessary here. Related to the examinees, I'd ask the board to publish an anonymized data set of MFT clinical examinees from, and what I would suggest is July 1, 2016 through September 30th, 2017. Steve, I know you're concerned about the pass rates for the beginning of 2016 as well, so whatever date range is appropriate. Similar to the data set that you published in 2008. That data set should include degree program enrollment date, time as a registrant, exam attempts, really everything that was included in that very nicely done 2008 data set. Alongside that, if staff could produce a list, I believe you have it in your possession, of early adopters of the 2012 curriculum. We could sort of code that into the data set of examinees and really meaningfully determine whether the change in curriculum is linked to the drop in pass rates. Related to the exam itself, we would ask that the board work with OPES to produce some retired items, as well as perhaps a total word count for the clinical exam, so that all of us can more closely examine what has been rumored for some time, that the questions are long, convoluted, and in many cases grammatically challenged, and that these may be issues that impact exam performance. It's not my intention to blame anybody here today. I think we all have a shared interest in figuring out what's happening. My hypotheses about the new curriculum could be wrong as well. I'm simply requesting that the board recognize this for the concerning historical anomaly, or whatever other word you want to use, the concerning thing that it is, to recognize that it is deeply unlikely to be true that 44% of first-time examinees are in fact unsafe for independent practice, and to join me in asking why. Thank you.
I will commit to the board that at the February meeting we will have a closed session with OPES to more in depth hear about the exam development, and I'll commit publicly to the extent that we're able to release any information from that closed session that does not compromise the exam, I will.
Thank you.
Might I suggest that we not cover the stuff we've always covered before about how the exam is done?
No, a closed session is where we get to be very blunt.
Yeah, but if you could give her these questions that Ben brought so that she could speak to the answers of those questions, that would be really helpful.
And not get the PowerPoint. No, it's not, what they do publicly is going to be very different than what they discuss with you in closed session. For those of you, I think Renee and Christine, you were on the board when we were evaluating the national MFT exam, there were things that we could state and speak about frankly in that session that you can't talk about publicly because it compromises the exam. So we will have that kind of conversation.
And also the questions that Jonathan raised as well.
Right, right. No, I will share all those concerns and ask them to specifically address all of that with you.
Okay, back to the public.
Hello, I'm Wendy Vittlage, LMFT. Thanks, Ben, for speaking so eloquently. I'm not going to be that eloquent, I guess, but I'm speaking more for the interns out there. I do a lot of coaching and advocating for 10,000 interns. And I get a lot of calls and emails and messages about the anxiety, pressure, all of those issues. To me, that feels like that is a huge piece of why people are not passing. You know, they know the material, they study, and they get into a little box called the PSI computer room, and it's not a natural setting, and they have to get into this mode of the clock on the corner and all of that. So it's really about helping them reduce their anxiety about taking the exam, how to connect differently with the exam. And I'm just finding, I know for me personally, it took me 2 years, I'm being transparent here, to get through my exam due to anxiety. And finally, when I learned how to connect differently with what I was reading and really make them my clients, not my questions, and really just have a whole different mindset, I passed, and I was really grateful. And it wasn't for naught, because there's a lot of blessings that came out of how I'm helping so many people right now. But I wanted to just address that issue, because I know there's statistics around it and there's schooling, but the pressure and anxiety that these interns have, of especially the clinical, because they're one step away from their license and they have job pressures and promotions that they're not getting, and it goes on and on. I hear all about it. One thing that I'm getting a lot of questions about, or is to pose to you guys, is also the font size, even on the computer. Just putting it out there. I know that's PSI, but I just want to let you know that that's an issue that a lot of interns have with the size of the font in the computer.
Too small?
Too small. So I'm just being the voice right now.
Okay.
And again, Ben mentioned about the convoluted questions, and people are always asking about that. Again, the more that they can get interested in what they're reading, the more focused they are, and they don't have to reread it. So that's what I'm helping people on. So thank you very much.
Hi, Kathy Atkins, Deputy Executive Director of the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I first wanted to say thank you. I was very impressed for the thoughtful and mindful conversation the board has had, and the presentation and research Steve has done. So I wanted to really thank you for that, as well as obviously a lot of work Ben has put into researching this. I'm not going to try to recap what Ben said. He did it excellently, and I'll just concur with everything he said. But what I wanted to add just is that, you know, I tend not to worry about the stats and the blips quite as much as Ben does. But with that said, I think when you look at the recent scores, especially for first-time takers, I do find them alarming. To Ben's point, 50% of these people are not ill-prepared to practice with the public. So I do find that quite concerning. Second, when you are in closed session, and I understand why you have to do it, I just hope that you recognize that you have a lot of people looking to you to understand why this is happening. So just as you're speaking and as you're deciding what to release to the public and what to keep confidential, obviously there's going to be things legally you have to keep confidential, but in the spirit of transparency, I encourage you to release as much information that you feel you can. And again, just thank you for having this mindful conversation. One more thought, sorry, I just forgot. To the other point made, I do think this is probably not something you're going to do in the near future, but this test is someone who, part of my job is to read very difficult, hard to understand legal language all the time, and I find the test almost impossible to get through and understand myself. So I just throw that out there over the years of just something to consider as you go down the path of these tests. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello, I'd just like to echo the desire from the pre-licensed community that the BBS continue to be as transparent as possible with this process. I just very briefly wanted to share my own personal experiences. I did take the clinical exam as a first-time test taker in April of this year. And unfortunately, I don't know if it was a communication issue with the BBS or PSI or OPS, but I was initially told by a BBS staff member that I failed the clinical exam. I was at an event, a BBS staff member approached me, said the analysis period had concluded and they could tell me what my exam result was. I later learned the analysis period had not actually concluded. This was on April 21st when I had the conversation. The analysis period concluded on April 27th. I find that problematic that they were not informed of that information, and I find it concerning that I was told I failed. And then later learned in the PSI letter that I had passed. I have heard of other instances where something similar happened, where interns received letters from PSI initially stating they failed, then received a second letter stating they passed. So I would like to ask that the BBS look into this. Again, I don't know if it's a BBS issue or a PSI issue, but it is very concerning to me. And I believe the more transparency that the BBS can give to the pre-licensed community, the more that can help with the anxiety that so many test takers are experiencing.
Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea. So, no, we'll look into that. They should not be giving you the pass rates. Staff should not be telling you, number one.
Especially wrong.
Yeah, and so.
We addressed that with staff.
We will address that at the staff level.
We already have,
obviously, and
actually.
have we, good.
Yeah, we have, and then the other issues, but yeah, we can, as a.
And we're aware of the challenges with PSI. It's one of the reasons that we are exploring the option of doing our own contract with a different exam vendor.
I was going to tell you later, but why not do it publicly?
Sure.
So a colleague of mine is left-handed and she's having some health issues and wasn't thinking about, oh gosh, I've got to let him know I'm left-handed. She's 3 weeks out from taking the exam. They said, oh, you should have told us like 6 weeks ago. We can't give you a left-handed mouse. We can move the mouse to the left side though.
PSI told her that?
Yes, so in 3 weeks, she's got to take the test with a right-handed mouse because 3 weeks was not enough notice.
That's not okay.
So I just adding to your PSI evidence of problems.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for, more? Yes.
Hi, Todd Pellegrino with Therapist Development Center. Something that Ben had brought up, and I just want to highlight, is making sure that we do take a look at the word count, and as well as take a look at what is the average time it takes a test taker to complete the test, and how many of those test takers are falling short, are not able to complete that, because that is a concern that we hear often, and I just want to highlight and stress that before.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to share, I don't mean to speak for the board, but definitely I'm sure the public knows how much we are concerned. So all of us, or we're service providers, or we're consumers, or we're clinicians. In my little experience in going to the test, obviously I haven't taken. I'm not looking forward to it. And
Especially now.
But no, in my nonprofit as well, and speaking on the voice of the interns, and I see that stress, the accumulation coming through and forward, and I notice it almost happens all the time. Those interns are coming with more struggles. It has to do with economic struggle. You know, they're running a family. They don't have the opportunity to take the test over and over and pay private enterprises to be prepared. They're usually the one that are failing the first time. It's almost mathematic. I mean, I've seen it. I haven't run too many. I don't have a pool of how many thousands, but definitely in a list of about 45 of them in the past 3-4 years. It happened over and over, and I see that. Then they have those few interns that actually come from, you know, they're more well off, and they don't have to work in the meantime they're doing internship, and usually they go fine. So it's really, and they're equally dedicated. Obviously, it's not about dedication anymore, and it just really strikes me. I don't have national data as that, you know, share with us, which are very important, of course. But I just want to share with the public that we feel that, we hear, we experience it. So it's not about not thinking that this is important. I also side with Jonathan about the understanding about who are these people. if we have the opportunity to know more about them, even if it's by zip code, sometimes we'll tell you more, and try to reduce the gaps. And we do as much as we can, of course. So thank you. Just want to share that.
And I would just like to add, as a LMFT member, I actually had the privilege of taking the last cycle of the actual boards where you went to the hotel and stood before a table and did your vignette. I didn't have to do the clinical vignette, so I'm unfamiliar with that process. But in light of everything that we share, we want to thank you for what you share, but I think we definitely want to balance that with the reality that we definitely want to have a rigorous testing process that sort of adequately helps to disqualify unqualified licensees. I mean, so there is a delicate balance that we have to manage. We want it to be fair, we want it to be equitable, but we also want it to be discriminatory in terms of people who are not qualified to be licensed and to practice unsupervised. It should be able to do that, and I think that's a critical component that we definitely want to keep in place. I want to keep it in place as a licensee and a practitioner. I want my colleagues to be competent. I want them to be prepared. I want them to have every opportunity to pass, but I also wanted to disqualify people who should not be practicing independently.
Ben?
Ben Caldwell, AMFT California. I got back up to wholeheartedly agree with you. I want there to be a rigorous testing process. One of the things that we've heard from OPES is that the pass rate is going to vary a little bit because they're not looking for a target pass rate. It's a criterion reference test about minimum competency, and that makes some sense. We want there to be a minimum competency standard. That's a rigorous testing process. That's fine. What doesn't make sense is to say in one breath that a low pass rate is okay because it's a criterion reference test, but then to say in the next breath, but a 90% pass rate is not okay because it's too high. It's either a criterion reference test or it's not.
Okay. I think, with all the discussion that we've heard, it goes to the point that writing questions is an art, and writing is a science. And it's not something that just anyone can sit down and think that they've done a really good job on writing a multiple choice question. And that's why questions are usually not written by the person who writes the book. They're written by people who are actually skilled and have degrees in being able to do that job. It's a very difficult job to have a well-structured question that actually tests what it intended to test. And so I think that when we go into our executive session, I know that will be one of my concerns. I'd like to know how it's constructed, and I would like them to show me how it tests what it intends to test. Okay.
So I totally understand the concern about, how the test being developed and stuff. So when I, me being a clinical supervisor and, dealing with a lot of the student intern, giving them clinical hours. So what I find out is that, when, because, all these registrants, it still take them a couple years after they graduate from school, and then in order to be eligible to take the test. So oftentimes, they're accumulating, the practical experience working and whatnot. And yet also a couple years after they go, leave school, and then be able to, pick up the books and, and do the test again. It's a lot of pressure. Not that they're, I have to commend the schools, all the students that they come out, they're very well equipped, with their knowledge and stuff. But it's about, when life gets in way, there are many responsibilities. The test anxiety, to me, my observation over the last, decade, it's real. It's real. So, the test preparation process, is a big deal. So we can look at, the test, like, how valid it is, what it is, how, the passing rate, and discuss it to the T. Eventually, it's really about the individual, how well they feel comfortable of taking the test. Because in the moment, when the anxiety kicked in, it just does a real thing. So I just want to put it out there that, we have to a certain extent, we also need to look at the registrants as to how well prepared they are, how well they, they feel comfortable and confident taking the test also.
Renee?
I wanted to thank Ben for his presentation, and certainly it's helpful in terms of what we're going to be looking at. The one, I think test anxiety is, take this the way I mean it. If you talk to people taking the bar, they're pretty anxious too. I mean, it's just it's only therapists who think it needs to be treated, before, before they take the test. And sometimes it should be probably, but my concern, I guess, hearing this over many years, going way back to the orals, which I took, and the written, about the written, the one consistent thread that bothers me the most is the issue of, quote, convoluted and poorly grammatically written, difficult to understand questions. That's the one thread from the Ice Age till now in terms of testing that really disturbs me, because that's not a test of competency, underneath it. So I guess what I'm wondering, I understand that it's a confidential process, it has to be. Is there a possibility of getting 3 or 4 or 5 old, outdated, but still fairly current questions without compromising any kind of test integrity? The answer could be no. I mean, for us to look at in closed session for the licensees to look, and probably all licensees can do it, doesn't have to be MFTs, and say, yeah, that is sort of, do you walk to school or carry your lunch? I mean, that I'd like
It's
to raise
possible.
the issue.
Yeah,
Because
it's
I would,
possible.
instead of talking around it and around it for 30 years, I would like to take a look at some real questions.
I will ask the question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I just piggyback on that quickly and add to what Renee just said? I've been schooled in English, and I consider English my native tongue, even though I'm not of English descent. But I can tell you that the double negatives that are used in those questions, it's not that I didn't understand my material. I didn't understand the question that was being asked. It was so convoluted, and you spend a lot of time figuring out what it is that they're really trying to ask. Was that a red flag, or are they asking you to identify the red flag or not to identify it's very difficult. So, I'm glad that the non-English speakers are getting a little bit of extra time, but that makes it doubly harder for even native speakers to have a difficult time with that, so.
May I have just one final word? I just want to be able to assure Ben, I'm very troubled by the pass percentage rate myself. I took many license tests, in my life, and then I really think if something in the 40s and 50s is something wrong with the passing rate. So I think we really should look into that in the closed session and see how they set the passing rate. I don't care what criteria they use, but I would like to examine that closely.
Okay, Kim's going to finish up with a couple of really quick on personnel, and then we're going to take a break.
Okay, so the final component to the EO report is a personnel update. We have a new cashier in cashiering. His name is Angel Quintero, and he joined us September 11th. Cashiering is fully staffed. Currently, although the packet says 4 vacancies, we actually have 3. We filled the LMFT evaluator position just yesterday. Robert Esquivel started training to be an LMFT evaluator in our unit, and then the remaining vacancies we are either recruiting or we're evaluating the need for that particular position. So we only have 3 vacancies.
So Kim, how many staff we have now in the BBS?
I'm knocking on the door of 60 if I haven't crossed over it. Yeah. So
We have grown a lot.
just a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah. So, is that it? That's it.
Okay, we're going to adjourn for break at 10:04. We can be back at 10:20. Back to order. It is 10:19. We're going to move on with the next order of business, which is An update by Roseanne.
Yes, so the
Item
next,
number 8.
the next item, we're going to do an update on the data collection to study trainees paying for supervision and practicum placements. At our May 2017 meeting, Dr. Benjamin Caldwell presented the board with some evidence that some practicum sites, especially those in the Los Angeles area, are beginning to charge trainees fees to volunteer with their organization or fees for supervision. And the board directed staff to research this issue further and report back. So at the time of Dr. Caldwell's presentation, we were already preparing a survey to go out to schools for the exempt setting committee. So we went ahead and included a question about this issue on that initial survey. So we asked the schools if any of their practicum sites require students to pay fees directly to the site. The survey was sent out this past summer. It went to schools with a degree program intended to lead to licensure with the board. It asked that only one educator per degree complete the survey and that the responding educator was involved directly in coordinating student practicum placements. So we have the results of that particular question today. It is shown in attachment A. We had 76 respondents, and just under 70% indicated that their practicum sites do not require students to pay a fee. However, 17% indicated a supervision fee, and 17% indicated a training fee. And about 8% indicated another type of fee, such as a fingerprinting fee. So the results of the survey kind of indicate that we might want to gather some more information. Specifically, we can delve a little bit deeper into of those particular sites that are charging a fee for the practicum placement or the supervision. What areas of the state are those sites located in? Are they primarily in Los Angeles, or are they concentrated in some other areas that we need to be aware of? It raises the question, do schools ever pay the fee for the trainees, or are the trainees always paying it directly? Are the students informed of a fee ahead of time, ahead of their practicum placement, and do they have any alternative, do they have a choice in when they select a site of whether or not they're going to pay a fee? And then also, I'd be interested in their reasonings for the fee. So with that being said, I've drafted a second school survey that goes in a little bit deeper, and that's shown in attachment B. And I wanted to get feedback before I send it out to make sure that we're collecting all of the data that we want to receive. If there's anybody has any other suggestions, we can add that to the survey. I also took a look at the Board of Psychology's regulations. The Board of Psychology prohibits any individual gaining supervised professional experience toward licensure from gaining experience by a person that they've paid for that supervision. So you can't pay for supervision with the psychology board. With that being said, I can open this up for discussion.
So Roseanne,
For purposes of order, I'll have the board discuss this first, and then I'll open it up for the public. Christina?
So I'll go first.
Okay.
So Roseanne, will you send this survey out to just the LMFT license type, or to everybody?
I was thinking all the school survey sites, although I am aware that the practicum is a little bit different for LCSW, but we do have the contact information for LCSW schools as well.
So if you plan to send it out to everybody, it will be nice to indicate the license type.
Okay.
And then
Good
the
point.
word trainee becomes not applicable to the social work interns or the registrants, because they're not the trainees, none of those titles. So maybe that would be something, legal-wise to, modified.
And Roseanne, I had a question for you. Leah?
Go ahead and ask your question first.
I'm sorry.
It looks like there's some duplication. In other words, people who paid for supervision were also charged for training, because otherwise the numbers don't add up. So if those are duplicated, are those cumulative then? So are they being charged for both? That was my only question. So I'd like to see, if we're going to do a survey, that we make sure and capture that, because if in fact they're paying for both, then in fact your fees are getting up to like over a third of Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay.
Leah?
I want to speak to some of the questions that you have. So, does your school utilize any practicum sites? And then your answers are does not charge, charges fees at the site, charges. So those are two, those answers don't match the question. So the question is, do they have any sites? So that's a yes or a no. And then if no, then we can move on to the next, like we can drop the whole thing. And then in yes, then answer, is it some of your sites, all of your sites, or how many or what percentage or something like that. So you want to make sure you ask those questions. Because the answers to number one could be different for different agencies. So maybe you would say mark all that apply, because it does not charge any, charges fees to work at the sites, charges fees for supervision, charges other fees. So they could have, different sites would have different structures. You see what I mean?
I see what you mean.
Yeah. And then on many of these answers, I would always have an other blank. Just, you never know what's out there, so just put an other on everything with a blank that people can go into more detail. Like number 4 especially. How many of your sites charge fees? So instead of number 5, how many of your school sites charge fees? What percentage or what ratio? Like, is it 1 out of 50? Is it, because if you just have a number 10, that's not very meaningful. If they have 100 sites, it means something different if they have 100 versus those are the only 10.
Okay.
For each of your practicum sites, please list the type of fees. That's what your students have the option to work. And practicing, yeah, okay. And maybe on number 7, connected to that or after that, because it's in that frame of mind, like what barriers might they have to work at other sites? So sometimes there are other sites, but maybe we're in Orange County and they're in LA. So it's not practical for them to go to a site with an hour-long commute or something like that. So if there are options, or maybe, are they realistic? Or the other thing I'm thinking about is maybe all the sites that don't charge fees get filled up first, so they're highly competitive. So we're not kind of asking that question. What counties are they located? Has your school encountered any students who are unable to proceed? Let's describe how this works. What was I just thinking? Something else that might be interesting to know, like we had a site, and they said, like out of nowhere in the middle of the year, we're going to start charging fees now. And we're like, whoa, I'm sorry, you signed a year-long contract, so none of our students who are currently with you. And then, just so you know also, that creates disruption, so our students have to be secretive about not paying fees at agencies that really want our students, but we're like, we won't send people to you because we won't allow that. So like maybe a question around what complications come around or arise from agencies who do charge fees. It's not going to be easy to analyze that data, but I think you need, and maybe just is there anything else we should know?
Comments?
Yeah, general comments about that. So that's what stands out to me on this survey.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more suggestion. Maybe to ask the type of the agency, whether it's exempt setting government, nonprofit, that kind of stuff.
Make a list and then do an other for the ones that you forget.
Check.
Or don't know about.
Or don't know what they are.
Right.
Not sure.
Depends on who's filling out the form.
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Renee?
Question 6, I would just try to, first of all, I'd move it up a bit, the amount. and make it more difficult for them to avoid answering specifically? Because I could read that, and if I didn't want to deal, I'd write varies,
Okay.
and that would be it. So I would either give them amounts or something, so it's a forced choice, so it's harder to avoid answering, that's all.
And they may have multiple answers, right? One place may
Yes.
charge $25 a week and another may charge $25 a month.
So easier to answer, harder to avoid.
Okay.
Any other board members? Okay, Ben.
Ben Caldwell, AMFT California. Roseanne, thank you for pursuing this further. Additional data gathering is certainly appropriate. I've been in touch with some, but not all, of the agencies that we discussed at that meeting about 6 months ago. As best as I can tell at this point, this is an issue that impacts probably about 200 trainees every year in Los Angeles. So it's not a giant issue, but there is, of course, concern about the practice spreading because it seems to be pretty uniquely Los Angeles at the present time. When you are gathering data here, just for consideration, because I can make a good argument either way, you might want to have schools actually name the sites that charge. The reason being, if you've got one particular very large site that works with a lot of schools, you might get a lot of schools responding, yes, we work with agencies that charge, but they're really all only referring to one single agency. So it would just help with cleanliness and clarity of the data. We had a couple of other, I think, sort of technical suggestions on the language that I'll email you about. And just I want to sort of remind the board, and we've got some folks here from agencies too, who are, in many cases are folks I see regularly at the LAMFT Consortium. So just so it's on the record again, the intention here is neither to demonize sites who seem to be actually using these training fees pretty responsibly when they are collecting them, nor to simply say you can't get money for training your people. As a policy solution, what we organizationally are kind of looking toward and suggesting is that the sites would simply need to collect these fees from the universities. That way the negotiation would be a little bit less stilted, and those students who are paying those fees could collect financial aid for them, whereas right now they can't. We're really concerned that these fees, where they exist, further the divide between wealthy and non-wealthy among those who are trying to enter the profession. Thank you.
I need to react to that. The universities can't all pay. Like Cal State Fullerton is the least funded university probably in this state, and we can barely buy paper sometimes. So like paying these fees would be impossible. So while that could be a solution, I think the agencies who are there to serve underrepresented individuals, people who are from low-income backgrounds, many of those agencies, here they want diverse students, but many of our diverse students are also from low-income backgrounds and have to go to a Cal State Fullerton and can't pay those fees. So we want to keep that into consideration and see if there are some other alternatives that could be developed, or maybe they should just hire associates instead of pre-degreed people, except from privileged institutions that can pay for those fees.
Well, listen, one of the consequences of forcing the negotiation to be between agency and university rather than between agency and student is that some universities are better positioned to say no.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item. Oh.
Hi. Hi. My name is Marcy Kaplan. I'm the CEO of the Maple Counseling Center in Los Angeles, and I'm here with four other colleagues representing 4 organizations in total. We're all based in the Los Angeles area. We all serve clients throughout Los Angeles County. Airport Marina Counseling Service, the Southern California Counseling Center, and Open Paths. Combined, our 4 sites alone provide internship and training opportunities to over 300 graduate students and folks who have finished their academic work annually. So it is far greater than, I think, a number that was given a little while ago. We're all nonprofit organizations, and what we have in common is that we are nonprofits that have dual missions, both to provide good community counseling services where people pay what they can afford and offer training opportunities for the next generation of mental health professionals. We all are similar in certain ways, but we all have various differing varying areas of expertise where interns and trainees come to us and apply to us based on what their interests are as they see their future, as they see their career. And sometimes they actually go from one of our agencies to the other, depending on their changing interests, areas of expertise that they think may be well suited to them, etc. All of us get far more applications from both trainees and interns on an annual basis than we can afford to accommodate. So our process is actually highly selective, and we all have first-class, very, very highly regarded training programs. I think with that said, I will leave the rest to my colleagues to add to that.
Good morning. I'm Gail Wilburn I'm the Executive Director of the Southern California Counseling Center. And as Marcy said, we came here today hoping that you will include us in the work and in the background work that you're doing about students and payment of fees. I have the sense, some of us have the sense that this could actually end up going further, talking about interns down the road. So as Marcy said, we are nonprofits, and as I think somebody here on the board said, maybe it was you, Leah, students do have a choice about where they want to train. They choose our sites mainly because they can spend their time learning and dealing with clients and not doing DMH paperwork. And we've heard at the consortium that often the numbers are 60% of time doing paperwork and 40% of time actually seeing clients. So we charge a $70 a month fee for the training that we provide for our students and for our interns. And we have about 115 counselors. And I think we may have the biggest expense in that area of any of the other groups that I know of. We provide a trauma training program, an 8-month trauma training program for our third-year counselors, and the cost of that to us is $75,000 because we bring in all the proper trainers, and then those people are going out into the community and doing that work also in Watts. So we paid Ben actually to come and do a lot an ethics workshop for us, the 6-hour one. More than half of our clients, and we see about 3,500 people a year on Pico Boulevard and 1,500 in Watts, they pay our minimum fee or less, $16 or less. We thought, and we didn't know, but we thought with the arrival of the Affordable Care Act that maybe our services would be required less, and the opposite happened. People in the lowest of the low plan of the ACA get no services. So now we have 350 people waiting. And we're at a loss as to what to do about that, because we have a building, luckily, that we own, but we only have so many rooms in it. And so we're expanding into Watts so we can see more people, but that's a challenge. So we are nonprofits really working hard. We have a two-pronged, our two-pronged interests to take care of people who have no other place to go. We have 2 psychiatrists. We pay them what they certainly well deserve, but our clients who pay $5 pay them $5 too. So that's all money that we have to raise. So ergo the $70 a month training fee on our budget, and that's just peculiar to us, and everybody has a different budget, it's about $85,000 in our budget of about $1.6 million. I have copies of Rebecca Reed, who's the clinical director, clinical training director at Pepperdine, her answer to Ben at a consortium meeting, and would I be permitted to hand those out? Oh, okay, so I'll get them. I also wanted to quickly address some of the ideas that have been given to us so that we don't have to charge a fee. One of them was that we should charge our clients more. Well, then we would be abandoning our mission of treating the people who need care the most. So that wouldn't work. Another suggestion was, and these are Ben's suggestions actually. Another suggestion was we raise more money from foundations. Well, we are supported by many well-known foundations, but we feel that foundations are maybe going a little bit of a different way, and we may not have that revenue stream that we have in the past, but also it's really hard to raise money for mental health, and I think you all know that. You know, I make an appeal and you can't see anybody. You know, I can't say, well, here's this. And the last one was we could take government money. And then our whole model would be down the drain. I mean, take government money, they give it to you, and then they could take it away. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you very much, and I will get the...
Before you back away from, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, my name is Jonathan Maddox.
Hi,
I'm
Jonathan.
a training and internship program manager in one of our large public mental health systems. And so I really want to say I appreciate the work that your agency provides. I'm very familiar with community-based organizations, so thank you. So just for a point of clarification, it sounds like in your agency, the $70 a month fee directly goes into a training pot.
It does.
That is solely used for supporting and bringing in trainers to enhance the quality of didactic material that the students
Exactly.
are exposed to. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that's exactly right.
Are there other ways in which that money is used besides just the training budget, or is that really your sole purpose, is really to support the training budget?
Well, our purpose is really, I mean, and the $85,000 in our budget, it clearly doesn't cover all the training. We pay $75,000 just for trauma training. So it makes a bit of a dent. That makes a difference to us.
And then can I just ask one more clarifying point, just for your agency in particular? So, does your agency contract with like LA County Behavioral Health Services and receive? Do you have a contract with the county where you receive money, or that's what you, when you meant government, that's what you do not?
We take no government money at all. We go into LAUSD schools, to 6 of them, and do one-on-one counseling with students throughout the whole school year, and we do that for free.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deborah? So another question is, as you were speaking, that I'm not concerned that some people are charging, I'm concerned that the number is growing. So what I'd like to also ask is 10 years ago, how many people charged for supervision as compared to today? Because my fear is that soon everyone is going to charge, and that's going to be the norm, and then you've kicked out all the low-income students.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our students pay $6,000 a year in tuition, so they're paying, and then they're showing up for class for 3 hours, and they're working 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I also hear your situation and how expensive and difficult that is to provide that supervision.
We're not providing supervision for that $70. Our supervisors, I'm sorry, we have 85 volunteer licensed clinicians who supervise our students for free.
Okay.
So we don't pay supervisors. And so the $70 is to help us with the training, not having anything to do with supervision.
So I wish that training was in the schools where it's set
Yeah.
up rather than on your plate, because I feel like that's other than training for how your particular agency
Mhm.
runs, that would be yours, but like trauma training, they should have a course in trauma before they go out and start seeing
I don't think one course in trauma would do it. I really
would
don't.
agree.
Our
It has to
student-
be
our
the
s-
agency.
Our students get trained in CRIM, TRIM, and EMDR, and now I'm probably telling you more than I really know, because I haven't trained in it. But they're long, complicated trainings.
Right.
The EMDR is 4 weekends, and we bring in people from the Parnell Institute. And that's where the money goes.
I see. So it's that kind of training.
It's that kind
I'm
of training.
also
It's 8 months long, yeah.
EMDR trained as well, so I
Oh, you are,
understand.
oh, so
Yes.
you know what they all mean.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult bind, or maybe should I don't know. Anyway, I don't know that there's an easy answer, but
Right.
you can see my concern, right?
I can,
That all
I do.
the agencies
I
end up
know.
charging, because some agencies are using it to pay their supervisors. So every agency's structured differently, and so I know in other professions, it was a growing trend in the last 10 years, and now it is the norm. And that's going to be a huge problem if it becomes the norm.
Yes.
So if we could keep it differentiated, then not an issue. And like you said, not only are not all students interested in learning DMH paperwork, but some of them are just not a good fit for doing DMH paperwork.
Right.
They can do really awesome clinical work, but sitting down and dotting every I and crossing every T is not everyone's skill set, I think. So that's why I want to also just look at the growing, like, is it increasing, and where was it 10 years ago, where is it now?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think our main purpose, I think, for being here today is just to let you know that there's a lot to consider. It's pretty complicated. You're all smart, you know that. But we just, we're hoping to give our input about where we are and where we're coming from. Sorry, Jonathan.
So I have two other questions, and I appreciate your tolerance of the questions that I'm asking. And I just want to say thank you that you're providing your students for $70 a month, them being EMDR trained. That's going to accelerate their career in ways that training to associates in January who are not exposed to that will. So thank you for that. I'm wondering, does your agency have access to stipends for students who reflect the communities that they serve? Because I understand in your situation why you charge, but I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for students to receive something and not just pay because being a student is
We're not eligible for the stipend because we are not, am I right about that?
Yes.
Right. Yes. We're not eligible.
We're not eligible.
Okay. Meaning LA County has a stipend, but your students can apply, or?
We're not eligible.
It's
Because
their
you're not a
county
stipend.
stipend.
It's the
county
yeah.
offers the
And
money.
that's the
You have to work in the county, and those stipends are going away this year. This is last year.
Keep an eye on it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name again is Sierra Smith, and I'm Executive Director of Open Paths Counseling Center. And I wanted to provide a bit of additional context, particularly for our organization, because I appreciate a lot of the questions that are coming up, particularly around making sure that everybody has access. And so being a counseling center where I work really hard to ensure that my clinical staff represents the clients we are serving, I go to the Cal States. I go out and go, where are the communities that are bringing in the clinicians of color, so that way when clients are coming to us and asking for that, I can have that. We do charge $75 a month. However, where that is a barrier, we offer them the opportunity to do 5 hours a month of office work in lieu of that. Because the reality is that with a $400,000 budget, I guarantee that I am woefully underpaid and a very, very small staff that includes 2 intake coordinators, 1 part-time bookkeeper, and myself, and a part-time clinical director. I am doing all of the boots on the ground work. I am doing data entry. I am doing dishes in the kitchen when my clinicians don't do it. I am doing everything. And so for those who can't or choose not to do the $75 a month, I offer them an opportunity to lighten that load with some of the data entry, with some of the other phone answering, with other ways that they can make that up. And there are some students who choose to pay the $75 because they recognize that for them, with careers that they already have going on, with children, family, that they don't have the extra 5 hours a month. So there is opportunity there are options out there. I also want to point out that I didn't recognize that there was any surveying done of the organizations that are doing this. It was just the schools that were asked. And I would love for the organizations to be asked about what we're doing and how we're doing this, because I don't only use that money solely for training. We do have trainings weekly, which is wonderful training, but it does also bleed into other areas. And part of that is because of the way the lack of resources are out there in mental health. The reality is that the funding streams from the foundations, they've reallocated those to looking more upstream in terms of systems change, and they're funding a lot less of direct services. So it's a differentiation that we then have to scramble to figure out how we're going to make up. And that might shift, but right now with the current political climate, it's not shifting. It's going to be a while before it does that. So there is consideration, because we have a tremendous amount of empathy for our clinicians as they're doing this work, and we want to provide them with the opportunities and the training. So I just hope that resonates. So then that way, that's kept in mind, that this is, I think sometimes there's this perception of a money grab.
No.
And I worry about that in how it's viewed. So I just wanted to clarify.
Sierra?
Yes.
Thank you very much for the work that you're doing. And I think that's an excellent point about surveying organizations, because we do need to get both perspectives. Can I just ask you just a question, because I don't know. At what point do the students who are interested in coming to your agency find out that they need to
On the
pay
interview
this?
process, before they accept.
Okay, so that would mean that, and I'm just asking because I know we have MOUs with community-based organizations too. Is there any consideration for that being maybe adjusted to actually them knowing even before they apply that these are the schools that, I don't know, informing them earlier?
When
I know that's a
the
school
school
district.
sites, generally there's a practicum coordinator, and they'll ask if there's a fee.
Okay.
And I will frame it in terms of, yes, there is a fee. However, if that's a barrier, they have the option of doing 5 hours a month of service, which comes up to the equivalent of $15 an hour.
Okay, Leah, then Samara.
So I want to take what you've said, Kim and Roseanne, and once we have some names of the agencies, especially names that come up, well, even if they don't come up over and over again, is then to develop a survey that would go out to the agencies and understand like what's the structure, what is that money paying for, and some, how many of them have alternatives for students who can't pay, for example, and that might be helpful.
And it's worth noting that a lot of the folks who come to us are coming to us because of the communities we're working in.
Yeah.
And they want to be there,
Sure.
And for some of them who have spouses who can support them through this, they are all not, you can't paint them all with one paintbrush.
Right, yes. And also, just to put balance to the conversation, we have a Spanish-speaking program at our university, and all of our bilingual students get paid to go to their practicum agencies, so.
Well, and I will say, so we're funded by Kaiser, who's one of our funders, and they fund specifically our Spanish language services. Over 50% of our client base are Latino, and we have a lot of them are receiving services in Spanish. And so it's not a lot, but while Kaiser is specifically funding this, they get $10 per session in Spanish that they're doing. So that can offset it, because I guarantee they'll have that fee paid in a week with it, because there's a lot of need. But there's ways to work with folks, and they're coming to us because they have opportunities to do stuff that they're not going to get to do if they go directly into private practice. And we have clinicians who are out partnering with social service agencies in the community. We're in Lenox, we're in Venice, we're in South LA. Mm-hmm. So for people who want to be in those areas, and a lot of our people are career transition professionals, they've done their time in corporate America, and this is what they want to be doing now. They plan for that.
So I just wonder.
Sorry. No, it's actually it'll be short because my comments are almost identical to what Leah was just saying. Just as Roseanne, I don't know if there's opportunities for at least some of you all to assist Roseanne if we do decide to go down this path and looking at the kinds of agencies that are out there so that we get a pretty robust list, but then also looking at sort of how we address diversity issues, and then also a breakdown of how the different agencies utilize the fees that they do collect. I think that would be very interesting to know.
Thank you. Christina?
And that's a similar comment. And then adding pertaining to it, I just wonder, do you guys have like a, a gathering or like a formal structure, to gather all the non-profit organization, executive director, do you guys get together?
So the four of us get together quarterly and compare notes and talk about best practices and what works, what doesn't. We use each other as sounding boards. I've only been doing this for a year and a half. I come from other areas of the nonprofit sector, and they've been tremendous support in understanding the mental health field. So yes, we do, to answer that question.
Yeah, no, definitely. The next question would be, it would be wonderful that, maybe to have some sort of representation, to talk to our board staff, to gather information. Because I think the voice is important, and also actually for us to know what really going on, what really is going on in the field, and
sort of
hearing the
boots on the
voice.
ground gives-
Absolutely. So I think, that's why I'm asking whether you have some sort of representation, so that you can have some sort of direct contact with the staff.
We all are a little bit different, so I think there is something to be said for finding out how each of us functions, but I think that there's a way to do that uniformly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there one last?
I had a quick question.
Oh, Chrissy?
So we have our exempt setting committee meeting tomorrow, and we did survey agencies, and we one of the ways that we did outreach on that was through the California Council of Community Behavioral Health Agencies. I'm not sure how many nonprofits are members.
Familiar with it.
Okay, all right. I'm just kind of curious. Okay.
Some of my colleagues here are also not familiar.
Okay, that's good to know.
No, Christy, just to say, that those are usually agencies that are contracted with counties that are part of CCCBHA.
Okay.
So private agencies that are not contracted with the government are usually not part of that.
Okay, and so any way that we can do some additional outreach, I think, if anybody has ideas, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Eden Garcia Bayless. I'm the Executive Director for Airport Marina Counseling Service, and I think it's great that you're doing a survey. I heard when you spoke about the surveys and the questions, what stood out to me is there was all these questions about barriers and then about advantages. So I'd encourage you to add some questions about what advantages are trainees seeing when they're paying for their internship. Also, to begin dialogue with the universities and maybe do some surveys with them to see if this plan for the universities to pay is viable. And I want to say that we do have a $1,000 training fee for our interns one time. If a therapist cannot pay that, we do work with them. We will either reduce the rate or we will just waive it. We will simply waive it. Because we do have this fee, we do set our training standards very high. We do we have created what we call a step-by-step training course so that our therapists know how to translate what they have learned in the classroom into practice. All of our therapists have at least one supervisor. They say that they're usually over-supervised, and they really like that because they get a lot of support. Our supervisors, many of our supervisors are experts in the field, and they specialize in either working with children, families, or couples. So when our therapists are done with the internship, they feel like they've gained a lot of knowledge. And the way that our therapists match the therapist with the client is also very strategic. So we will look at the needs of the client and what therapists will meet them best, as well as what clients will help our therapists grow. So I just want to end by saying that I think it would be a really disservice if, for us, it would really impact us greatly if this would be eliminated. We would need to reduce the number of interns that we take in a year, which would mean that we would reduce the number of clients that we see a year. And we see the majority of our clients are the underserved and underprivileged that have almost no money to pay and pay on average of about $12 a session. Yes.
Can I ask you, what's your ratio to trainees to associates? Now they're called associates, not interns, right?
Okay. That's more of a question for my clinical director. Okay. I'm going to let her.
So, I am Dr. Diana Hoffman, Clinical Director for Airport Marina Counseling Service. We train every given year between 50 and 60 trainees and interns. And I would say the majority of our MFT trainees are coming in as trainees. We typically have a 2-year training agreement, so that $1,000 covers just the training fee. We don't charge them again at all for the rest of their 2-year contract. So I would say probably at the time of application, we maybe bring in 2 or 3 associates, the rest are trainees.
And why do you think it's, not that I think we should cut it off for trainees the way psychology has, but what would it negatively impact you? Do you think there's something about trainees that go there that associates wouldn't? Is it because associates are getting paid when they graduate, and so?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think that for us, the fee does go for training, and the trainees come in with really no experience when they're applying to us. And so it does take extra time, energy, and training and support to help them manage their anxiety, but also to help them build their skills.
Yes.
I think interns very much like our program. I'm not sure, I'd have to investigate. It's a very good question that I'd like to know the answer to. I just don't have the answer yet. Yeah, that's a good question.
Christina?
Yeah. So just help me understand. So you sign a 2 years contract when they enter in as the trainee.
Yes.
And then do you, because within.
They usually graduate and become an associate.
Right. And so when they get their, so when they transition to become an associate, do you, hire them? Or, do they become employee or?
I would love to do that if it were in our budget. Right now it's not, we're still a nonprofit. So when you said sometimes you can't pay for paper, we appreciate that point.
I was exaggerating there in case my department's watching.
Of course. I have my executive director watching, so. So we aren't able to pay them at this time. I think these are great aspirational goals, but for nonprofits, these are long-term goals that would take us a long time to get to. As our colleague pointed out, it is hard raising money from private donors and grants for mental health. It's hard to put a face to mental health because of confidentiality, rightfully so.
So do those trainees or interns within that 2 years contract, is it like their primary jobs or?
They get more advanced training.
Okay.
So I don't think I quite answered your first question. They do get more advanced training. So we do start them in our step-by-step training course, which is a structured training course. And then in the second year of their contract, they can participate in one of our more advanced training tracks, which is the family and child track or the couples track, so that they get more specialized training. Our trainees are also at local high schools, middle schools, Boys and Girls Club of Venice. So all services that we are providing that LAUSD doesn't pay us for. So.
And I just want to add that we cater to the working intern or therapist. So many of the therapists really like that we are open 7 days a week. We provide supervision 7 days a week in the evening, as opposed to a 9 to 5, clinic Monday through Friday. So there is just more flexibility and more advantage.
I also just wanted to
requires more overhead.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, also, we would be open to completing a survey as well. We'd be happy to answer the questions of what do we charge, where does our money go, and also if you want to survey our trainees, we would be happy to do some. We want to know the answers to these questions as well. I do think it's a great aspirational goal, so I appreciate Ben's taking this up. To be mandated, especially quickly, a lot of us, it would eliminate our training. So that's why we're up here.
And I want to thank you for the fantastic work that you do. And this isn't directed at you, just more of a broad consideration. Maybe one of the things we can look at too is how many of these agencies are APIC, KPIC, or APA approved sites.
We are KPIC approved.
And so those come with annual fees that, I'm sure some of these sort of training fees are deferring the cost of actually providing that high quality resume building sort of training experience so that when they apply for jobs, they may have the next step up. But I think that would be a great point just for us to survey and see how many of these are approved sites because they have significant costs connected with them.
I would also,
I was going to let you take over.
I also wanted to mention that in exit interviews with our trainees that usually are then our interns by the time they're exiting, we do ask them for feedback. Some we get anonymously, some they'll just meet with me and feel very candid. And rarely do they comment about the fee that they had to pay at the very beginning. Additionally, we also have scholarship programs. We do offer, prior to interviewing, all of our material that talks about our training site includes that this fee is part of it, so transparency. But we also do have programs. We would never want this to get in the way of somebody getting quality training, who we think is a good applicant and a good fit for our agency. So I think each of the agencies here that charge have some kind of program to accommodate accordingly. Additionally, I would say that the feedback we get, our trainees are still in practicum class at their schools, and a lot of the feedback we get is that other students aren't getting the quality training that they're getting at our sites. They're not getting the structured training courses that we offer. A lot of them get an orientation, which we also do, and then are just thrown in. They get their clients their first, second, third day there, and they have some supervision or are under supervised, and they don't get anything for skill development. And we very much focus on skill development. And again, the training fee, we do not charge for supervision. It is a fee that goes towards training. And so it seems to be serving those that we're trying to train, who then ties into our previous conversation, are then more qualified to take the licensing exam and pass it, and are qualified to then be practicing independently. So,
Sarita?
Any questions? Yeah.
Did you add something, Roseanne?
I just wanted to say this has been very helpful, and I definitely would like to talk to you guys more. Would you mind leaving before you leave today, either giving me your contact information or leaving it with Christina?
Absolutely.
So that we can be in touch.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
I also wanted to mention, I appreciated Ben's point that he does give us the benefit of the doubt that the money is being spent responsibly. So I wanted to thank you for that. Sarita, do you have any questions?
So I just wanted to comment. I think I'm very impressed actually with the work that you all are doing. So thank you.
We work hard, so that's very nice to hear. Thank you.
For when I'm listening to your budget numbers and what you have and what you all are doing and how many volunteer supervisors you've been able to get together, I think that's very, very impressive. So kudos to all of you for doing that. And I also am very impressed by the rigor of the training that you're describing. And if somebody's getting that for $70, then it's huge. What I would say, and maybe this is stating the obvious and you guys have already thought about this, and much to Leah's chagrin, I would say if you're taking in trainees, then universities need to possibly support you in that process a little bit. So that's one. The other thing I would say is, I head up a community-based organization that contracts with county mental health. But I do know of other organizations in the Bay Area at least, where they are providing services on school sites and the school districts are paying for those services. Yeah. So I think, taking no for an answer very easily, and maybe you haven't, I don't know, but I'm just going to put that out there. I think there are ways to talk with the school district and bring that forward.
Absolutely.
And then I think there's also, maybe there's a way to collaboratively apply for a grant or a foundation support or something, which can sustain that, particularly as you're talking about Kaiser and the resources that they're contributing. I think there are probably opportunities out there because it sounds like you all are doing amazing work. So thank you for doing that.
Originally, when we were providing services on campuses at local public schools, there was seed money to start these programs, but not to continue them. The funding, I think we've been on campus at the local high school for almost 15 years, and after the first 4 years, we were no longer paid. And we decided that to continue keeping our interns there because it's not only good training for them, but also the service is just so needed on campus. And so it's a win-win to keep us there, but we then do have to do our own fundraising for it. So LAUSD, I don't know that they still fund mental health services. Campuses still have a school psychologist on site, usually one, maybe two. So that,
If I could just add one thing about
Thank you.
About school services. We all provide services in LA Unified School District. That's kind of the white elephant in the room. And they don't pay us anything for anything that we do. So it is one school district, which is a huge school district that we're all in different parts of the county. The Maple Counseling Center we do have a grant from an affluent school district that has been giving us a chunk of money since pretty much the inception of our organization. And they've just renewed it for over 40 years. So we're the exception, and we're very fortunate. It's not a huge contract, but we have a dozen interns in that school district throughout the course of the school year. So it's heavily staffed. But LA, I just want to be clear that it's LA Unified that seems to be the barrier there, not a whole bunch of other school districts.
Betty has a question.
Well, I
And then
just
Sarita.
wanted to address the issue that school districts don't pay for mental health services, and that all school districts receive funding to provide educationally related mental health services. They're required to do so. And so it may be the populations that you're serving within the district are not accessing a funding stream that might be associated. But I didn't want the record to show that districts aren't providing educationally related mental health services because they are required legally to do so.
I
and
think they
required
do
funding.
meet the minimum requirements, and I think what they provide is minimal. That's my impression when I speak to them.
Yeah, that's right. If I might just interject, we're kind of veering off and now talking about school services, and school services is not on our agenda. So we're kind of stepping outside the bounds, which I have just been told by council. And so if we can bring it back, I would really appreciate that. Sarita, did you still have a comment?
I
Something
just.
other than school services?
Yes, it's other than school services. This was in response to, I heard a couple of times people say you can't put a face on mental health. While I agree, it's all confidential, but I can tell you that people who have gone through services and received services often are willing to put themselves out there and talk about how beneficial it was, and how, when you hear it from a client, then that it's much more powerful, and it gives you a tool to take to a funder. My agency particularly, we have actually done an anti-stigma video in multiple ethnic languages just to make that point, and it is real clients who have come out and spoken, and by choice. So don't give up on that.
Kathy Atkins with CAMT. I want to preemptively apologize because I've been furiously taking notes while everyone's talking, so there's no particular order to what I'm saying, so I apologize. That's like a stream of consciousness here. First, I recognize what a complicated issue this is, so I thank the board and Kim, Roseanne, and Christine, everyone else who's going to have to tackle this, as well as everybody here who has come to speak. This is an ongoing, complicated issue, so I'm glad it's being addressed. I don't, personally, at CAMP, we don't know that we particularly think it's a 1 or 2 or 3 agency issue thing. I think it's more global than that. So I want to keep that in perspective. When I looked at the school survey, it doesn't, I appreciate, thank you for doing that work, but it doesn't seem to really get into the weeds a little bit. And so I'm getting confused by all the different surveys that have gone out, to be frank. I mean, there's like ones to agencies and one to schools, and I can't figure out which committee or group they're with. So I know some have come in, and I guess what I would encourage you to do, and I apologize for doing this because I know it's work, but is when you resend out the survey, it's not just to schools, it's to agencies, to the trainees that are in the agencies, so that you're looking at different kinds of criteria, not just from the schools, because the schools only has a certain amount of data. The agencies are going to have a lot more in the weeds, complicated, in-depth information the schools just don't have access to. Some of the questions I would be curious for the agencies is, do the training facility, I think this was touched on, do the training facilities provide training that the average clinic cannot provide to the trainees that would potentially warrant a fee? Are there certain kinds of services, nights or weekends, that are outside an average clinic's ability that might warrant some kind of fee? I heard someone comment, I would caution only sending a survey to certain facilities. I think I heard someone say, well, you should get the names and then send it to those places. I would just caution you, I think it's important to get data from all the different agencies, because I don't think you're really getting accurate data if you're just sending it to certain certain agencies or facilities or certain regions. I very much would like to know where agencies get their funding from. Do the agencies that we're talking about employ trainees only or interns as well? What is a supervision fee versus a training fee? I can't figure out the difference really, so I'd be curious. Again, I know there's a question that asks that, but what does that mean? Because I don't know the difference. Again, I think that this is I'm not convinced this is a regional issue as much as statewide, and I think Leah brought up that we don't particularly have a strong opinion one way or the other about this. We empathize with the agencies, and we definitely empathize with any exploitation that's going on. So we are just really curious at the data that still comes and have yet to make an opinion. So I just appreciate you putting it out there so that we can take a look at it as well. And lastly, I have concerns. I don't really know how you get this into a survey, but I do have concerns about the legal issues that affect the agencies that are doing this. I think some are legitimate training facilities that would kind of pass muster for the labor board, and I think some are probably copying what they're seeing that are actually violating law unbeknownst to them. So I'm hoping that with this data, potentially it could help some agencies recognize what they're doing is potentially not following the letter of the law. So again, I apologize for my stream of consciousness here, but thank you for tackling this. It's very complicated and emotional, so thank you.
Excuse me. Could you please, I'm sure you don't want to just hand your questions over to Roseanne. Could you maybe take a snapshot with your phone and send it over to her?
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
I won't understand it. Just email me.
Okay.
Ben Caldwell, AMFT California. Just a couple of points quickly. One, when we're talking about sort of the nature of the issue, I want to keep the focus on trainees, because I know we've had a little bit of discussion here about interns as well. So in terms of talking about numbers of people affected, in terms of talking about the legal context, it's not that trainee fees, or excuse me, it's not that intern fees are unworthy of also being discussed, but that there are enough contextual differences that the issue that I'm really hoping we will attend to specifically is sites charging trainees, people who are still within their graduate program. And the other thing is, Gail and I think have a pretty good working relationship. Some of the folks from the other agencies I don't know as well. I promise I'm nice. This is what I'm about to say is going to sound more combative than it's meant to be. That's why I wanted to preface it that way. So AMFT as a national organization, we've been able to have some. I've been able to have some contact with people around the country about kind of how practicum placements and traineeships are done elsewhere. And not only does this seem to be a California-specific problem, it really seems to be Los Angeles-specific. You might find one or two or three agencies around the rest of the country sort of dotted here and there that charge trainees, but it is really, really unusual, as best as we can tell, anywhere outside of Los Angeles. And again, my intent here is not to be combative, but rather as something to consider as we continue with data gathering. I have yet to hear anything that would make a case for, what is so different about trying to run an agency in Los Angeles as opposed to elsewhere that requires charging fees to trainees, when it seems like every place else in the country, facing many of the same pressures that the nonprofits in LA face, still find ways to provide adequate training to the graduate students working there without charging them additional fees to do it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's all right. Okay, I think we've gotten a lot of information.
Yep. And
I'm glad that you wrote those questions down because I can't even see her. Somewhere. Oh, way back there. Okay. Thank you for writing all those down, and thank you for providing those with our staff. At least we have this on a webcam so you guys can back it up and catch on all of the other comments that have been made by the organizations. And Ben, good closing remarks. I think we have to keep in perspective, everybody's got a different perspective and they're all coming from different sides. So, with different reasons. Then I'll close that comment off. We're done with that item. And I have a request for a quick 7 minutes? Okay, about 7 minutes. It is 11:20, no, 11:19. Approximately 11:30. Okay, and we're moving on to the strategic plan. Steve?
Oh.
Kim?
No, I can do it.
Steve and Kim?
All right. So before you,
Okay, just a second, I'm asking everybody to be quiet, please.
okay, so before you is a draft version of the strategic plan. It's one of the components is a message from our board chair. So, and she's in the process of developing that message. But in general, what is before the board and for your consideration is the goals, our goal areas and our objectives, to see if that meets with your approval, and if so, then if you would vote on that today, and then we can begin implementation January 1. Following that, if you adopt this plan as presented, then what we'll do is we'll set up meetings with Solid and start to develop the very specific action items that is going to be needed to achieve all of these goals.
Do the board members need a few minutes to read this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Peter doesn't have
Oh, yeah.
Here, Peter.
First page, that's like 85,000 license.
I know.
Updated.
So that's assumed.
Yes. Yeah, this is a draft. There are some wordsmithing edits that we'll need, as well as some updates, especially to our current licensing numbers, et cetera. So we'll go from there. So like Betty knows, it's 85,000. So it's not, it's 110. Yeah. So the goals and objectives actually start on page 9 of the document that you have. I think I would ask the board members too, if there's some wordsmithing or typos that you see, just email them to me.
Okay.
Yeah, or just hand me your corrected copy, and we can get those corrected.
Oh, here.
Yeah, no.
Is everyone ready to proceed? Yes, Peter?
No. Madam Chair, you can rule me out of order. But under goal number 6, outreach and education, is it too late to make suggestions, just add 3 more words or 4 more words, or that's out of bounds?
Where are you? I'm sorry, Peter.
But goal number 6, engage stakeholders through continuous communication about the practice and regulation of the professions. And after that, I would like to add the words and mental health care. Goal number 6.
You know what, Peter, I think I'm going to need to ask some clarifying questions on what our latitude is on the changing of particular words, goals.
Yeah, that's why.
Other than grammatical things here and there that might actually change the meaning of what it is. And so I guess I'm going to ask my attorney.
Did you already do the strategic planning session?
Yes, we held the session, and then this is the outcome of that session.
Okay.
So I would say that if the board members are not comfortable beyond just grammar and wordsmithing a little bit, then we should have another planning session to discuss.
No.
That's why I'm asking council,
Right.
does it go outside the scope of what we're allowed on this agenda?
So if that changes the, I don't know, I didn't see what you were talking about, if that changes the specific actual goal, this one is 6 is
up right here.
Goal number 6, yeah.
Professions and mental health.
And mental health care.
Mental health care.
Well,
Is it technical?
Maybe just be technical.
I don't, that's what we're asking.
Well, I mean, if our overarching authority is the regulation of those 4 mental health professions, I guess in my,
That would bring more clarity.
it might bring more clarity, yet I think defining professions, it's limited to what we do.
Right, so either way, it's gonna end up in the same result.
Correct.
Because this is only gonna apply to your practice act.
Correct.
If you want to bring more clarity to this statement, I don't see a problem with it, but again, it's not gonna not apply to mental health professions because this only applies to BBS.
So then it's up to the board if they want to have the clarity.
So based on what Sabina just said, are we saying that, are we saying that in the word practice, it's, we know that we're talking about mental health care?
Right, because it's
Kind of
a,
redundant.
right.
Peter?
Oh, my response? Oh, actually, I don't think it's that redundant because under Goal 5.8, we said develop outreach program to educate the public about the benefits of mental health care to reduce the barriers and destigmatize mental health care. So,
So as much as I agree with Peter on this, the risk is we're going to get into a conversation
right.
that then we make exception of.
Right.
We have a strategic planning time, and it wouldn't be fair to the process
Right.
to go over and try to interpret if it's content or not. It would be completely misleading. Even though
That's
I agree
fine.
with you, Peter, but I don't.
No, that's fine. I withdraw my suggestion.
But there's also the option of going back to another plan.
No.
We can make it a 3-dayer this time.
So I had a
Okay, we're devolving here.
Yes.
Hold on.
Just a quick question.
Order, please.
On goal 6, 5.7, improve best practices. I I don't remember the context of that conversation. That seems really vague to me.
Which one?
Number 5.7 and goal number 6. Although these numbers are
It should be,
probably-
yeah, it should be 6.7.
It should be 6.7, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a typo. That we can change.
Just like, okay. Yeah, of course.
Do you guys remember that?
I think the intent of that was to put in our plan that it's important that we attend those national events so that we can become aware of best practices, because we're using national examination and,
So we need to reword that.
Okay.
So it's not improve,
Mhm.
but
It's
maybe to
enhance.
enhance the awareness of best practice or something like that.
I think that needs wordsmithing, but I don't know that we need
What
to do
number?
it today.
It's numbered 5.7.
How about implement?
Actual fact.
We can put suggestions on our different.
Why don't you
pieces of
put
paper.
suggestions on it, and then we'll run them by Sabina. If it's like a very technical,
Yeah.
substantive change,
And
then
the word doesn't change the meaning.
as long as it doesn't change the meaning, we can move forward. If it does, then we'll be meeting again. Spending the day together.
Okay.
As much as I.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with 1, licensing. 1.1 to 1.4. Any comments?
Not wordsmithing, just
Not
substantive.
wordsmithing, not technical. Okay, no. Does everyone agree that this is what we agreed on when we made this?
Yes.
Yes?
how it-
Okay. You know what I'll do? I'll just ask if there's anybody who does not agree. Goal 2, examination. Anyone not agree and have a comment? Okay. Moving on, goal 3, enforcement.
I hate to be that person, but I'm not 3.3.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
also
We circled it,
It-
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's just,
Doesn't make
I mean, it's because we did talk about educating the DAGs and the ALJs on the professions and what they do. I'm not sure what the education was. Was it in terms of the impact of addiction and substance abuse on license?
No, it was to teach them about substance abuse and addiction, that like you can't have a .3 BAC and that just be a bad decision. Right.
Okay, so
Right.
the impact,
They
the
captured that
impact of
correctly.
addiction and substance
Yeah, there's
abuse
no profession.
on our profession specifically. Okay, so I
Okay.
just wasn't sure if it was wordsmithing or if it was two separate issues. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
no, not the profession.
Okay.
All right. Goal 4, legislation and regulation. 4.1 through 4.5. Anybody? All right, moving
So-
on.
Can I just say 4.4? So when I read it, it just doesn't quite make sense. Because improving the law and ethics renewal requirements.
So here's what we were thinking.
I remember what we were thinking, but then, I think the sentence doesn't come through right. It doesn't bring the clarity that it is about, when the law and ethics relating to our professional change, then we'll be able to, to give them the update.
Maybe it's explore, let's be more direct, explore the feasibility of creating a law and ethics renewal exam. Right, so what I had told her about, what I had talked about, I don't know if that's gonna be a possibility, but I'm licensed in another state, and in that state, when you renew, you have to take their course, which has all the updates of that year, and then you have to take an exam at the end of their course based on the standard stuff you always need to know, plus anything new that came up. So instead of doing some random 6-hour CEU, you have to take the course that the board developed. So that way, that would ensure that the
They're aware of the
licensees
new.
would know of the new changes.
And that sentence does not convey that message.
No.
So we need to work on that.
It's almost like, if you change the sentence to explore the feasibility of informing licensees about updates in relevant law and regulations to improve, or to, to reduce I don't know. Yeah.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Just turn it in. Yeah, write it down, turn it in, that way, yeah, she'll have us.
Okay.
Okay. Goal 5, Organizational effectiveness. Okay, any opposition? Concerns? All right, goal 6, outreach and education. Renumber them all?
Yeah. That changed.
Okay, Dr. Smith on that one. Anybody have any concerns?
Nope.
Okay, strategic planning process, I think that's kind of a fact sheet there. And that's it. So, we had the discussion, and the possible action, I don't know that we can take until we see a completed and corrected draft, so maybe in February. Okay. Yes, please. So we have no action, we just have discussion.
Just a question.
Yes.
So if what is being submitted is only going to be grammatical changes and not structural changes, couldn't we, like what we do for legislative items, propose to approve with
Mandated.
updated non-substantive changes?
I think that, I think that all of the ideas that people have had need to be turned in first. And I think if Kim and council decide that they're not substantive and they don't change anything, then they can send out an email to us or can you just tell us that it's fine?
But
We
so
could have
you
a
still need to
conference.
approve the plan though.
We could have a conference call to do something like that.
Absolutely, with 10-day notice, we can do that.
We could do a teleconference.
Just asking.
And, and take 10 minutes on the phone if we have to, or you can wait till February.
I was just trying to think of an opportunity to do it before the end of the year so that we can go into the new year with the strategic plan.
Well, but they would have to adjourn here and go out there and look at the,
We could do a call or
I
I'm
think
open to February.
a teleconference
Throwing
would
it out
take
there.
10 minutes and you could get it done before the end of the year because you've just got to look at it.
Yeah. December
That's
24th,
we
we have a call.
Doesn't like those teleconferences.
The day of Christmas.
Not my favorite, but I think what we could do is we could go back, we could put it here, we could take your suggestions, I can draft something out, I can send it to Sabina. If she deems that it's non-technical, it's not substantive, then I can give you that information. And then in terms of approving the plan, we can set up some type of conference call, perhaps in December.
No time in December. I got no more time in December.
If you're coming up on the 7th.
Then it better be on the 7th.
Yes, that would be the potential date.
I'll make it work for you.
Yeah, so, but we'll look in, we'll do a quick telephone conference to say yay or nay.
Okay.
Oh, I get it, when time is short.
Which it
You gotta
doesn't have
work
to be
with what
public,
you've got.
right? It's not
No,
public.
it's a public meeting,
It is, so
but,
it comes with the, okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. I'm going to turn it over now to Roseanne again.
So it's that time again where we're going to talk about the proposed omnibus bill for 2018. That's a bill that we run every year to do some technical, non-controversial or cleanup changes to our licensing law. So we've identified a few sections that need some cleanup. I'll go through them one by one, and I guess we can stop after each one to take any comments. The first is amend Business and Professions Code Section 27, disclosure of information on licensees and registrants. There's a section in law that talks about how boards and bureaus under DCA are required to disclose certain information. For most boards and bureaus, it identifies that they must disclose information on licensees and registrants if that particular board has registrants. Our section does not reference registrants, even though we have them. So we just want to change the law to state that the Board of Behavioral Sciences shall not disclose information on its licensees and registrants. So, minor change. Any comments?
Any discussion? Is there a motion to amend the BP?
It's a whole comprehensive package.
Oh, it's the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so any questions? All right, next one.
Okay, item number 2 is just some cleanup, changing the intern title to associate. As you know, that change is going into effect on January 1, 2018. Last year, any legislation we ran, we did the title change in it. This is just identifying the sections that we did not hit with legislation last year, and finding the intern title and changing it to associate. Okay.
Okay, any
Not-
discussion? Intern to associate? Okay, all right.
Moving on to item 3. This section, this is a pretty key change. There are certain sections in the law that are the educational requirements for degrees begun after August 1, 2012 and completed after December 31, 2018. Those are considered the new education requirements, and they're specified in Business and Professions Code sections 4980.36 for MFTs and 4999.33 for LPCCs. So those are the new requirements. The older requirements for people that began graduate study before August 1, 2012 are still in the law right now, and those are found in sections 4980.37, .39, and .41 for MFTs, and then section 4999.32 for LPCC applicants. These sections are set to repeal on January 1, 2019. And if that were to happen, then applicants with older degrees would need to meet the educational requirements of section 4980.36 and 4999.33. Staff does not believe it was ever the intent of the board when it ran legislation to change the education requirements in 2009 to require older degrees to eventually meet new requirements. Doing so would be pretty burdensome because degree requirements have increased from 48 units to 60 units, and practicum hours have also increased. We believe it was the intent of the board to have the schools phase in the new education requirements, but to eliminate but not to eliminate an applicant's ability to apply for licensure a few years down the road if they had an older program that they graduated under. For these reasons, we recommend striking the 2019 sunset date so that those particular sections for the older degrees do not sunset.
Any discussion? Okay.
Okay, moving along. Item 4, acceptance of the clinical exam score for an out-of-state applicant. Right now, there are some code sections that allow an applicant who obtained a license or registration in another jurisdiction to apply to the board without taking the clinical exam if they meet certain criteria. The law currently says that they may apply for licensure if they meet certain criteria. We think it's more accurate to say that they may qualify for licensure if it meets certain criteria.
Any discussion? Okay, next one.
A reference to supervised practicum for out-of-state applicants. Right now, there's just a little bit of a disconnect in how practicum is referenced in terms of what it's called for in-state versus out-of-state students. For MFT law that says that practicum must be supervised. LPCC law calls practicum supervised practicum or field study experience. However, the out-of-state sections just simply reference practicum, so we just want to bring the terms that we use to describe practicum for both LMFTs and LPCCs consistent for both in-state and out-of-state.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, and that brings us to the end of that.
We have 2 more still.
2 more, I'm sorry.
So item number 6, just some minor technical changes. The section 4992 contains a date reference that's obsolete for the social worker code. And then staff also is making some minor adjustments to the language in that particular code section, just because the timing of when the exams have changed, when the exams are taken, has changed the exam restructure, and it's a little bit more accurate to change how the exams are referenced, because depending on whether someone's coming in from in-state or out-of-state might depend on which exam they are currently taking. So just some minor wordsmithing there for accuracy.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay.
And then finally, attachment B of this packet shows some additional amendments that are being proposed by the Psychology Board. They're planning to propose amendments updating Business and Professions Code Section 337 and 728 in this year's omnibus bill. These sections have to do with what we discussed earlier, the professional therapy never includes sex brochure. And these code sections actually established that requirement in law. So they're doing some they're working with us and the medical board because these sections affect all 3 boards to kind of bring that language up to date. And so you can see what they're proposing, and they've just asked that the board provide any input they might have and approve so that when they run it, we're all in agreement. So that's the last change.
Okay. Any discussion by the board? Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to discuss any one of these items? Okay. So with that, do I have a motion? Okay, Christina?
I would like to make a motion to direct staff to make any non-substantive changes and pursue as a legislative proposal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll throw it to the new guy. Jonathan?
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, Christina?
Renee Bonner,
Yes.
Dr. Christine Willis-Fox,
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox,
Yes.
Max Disposey,
Yes.
Samara Ashley,
Yes.
Deborah Brown,
Yes.
Betty Conley,
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu,
Aye.
Dr. Leah Bru,
Yes.
Christina Wong,
Yes.
Sarita Kohli,
Yes.
motion carries.
Roseanne?
Okay, item B under this has been cut. It's going back to the Policy and Advocacy Committee. So we're moving on to C, which is proposed legislation regarding renewal of an expired registration number. And so current law specifies certain actions a registrant must take to renew a registration number before it has expired. However, the law is silent on actions needed to renew a registration number once it has expired. And so this proposal would specify how an expired registration number is renewed. The reason we're doing this, a little background, under existing law, a licensing board is allowed to appear in a criminal proceeding against a licensee or a registrant if a crime being charged is substantially related to the profession, to weigh in on furnishing pertinent information, making recommendations about specific conditions of probation, things like that. The law also currently does allow us to commence or proceed with an investigation or disciplinary action against a license or registration, even if it's expired. We ran that piece a couple of years ago to kind of make the law a little bit more clear about that. It was in question. The problem that we're encountering now is that although the law grants the authority for the board to take disciplinary action against an expired registration, it still faces some difficulty taking action in some cases where a registration is expired. So the Attorney General and judges and others in the legal profession dealing with our board cases do not understand that renewing an expired registration is simply a matter of sending in a fee and checking some boxes on a form and sending it to the board. It's really that simple. So when the Attorney General's office is appearing on the board's behalf in a criminal proceeding or like a PC-23 proceeding to prohibit or restrict a registrant's practice, the judges sometimes don't understand why a PC-23 order is necessary in order to prohibit or restrict the practice because it's expired. And so this has happened a number of times in our enforcement unit. And so both the Attorney General's office and DCA Legal has advised that the board pursue legislation to specify how to renew an expired registration so that they can see that process outlined in law. So the proposed solution you can see in attachment A, we are proposing that to put in law that to renew a registration that has expired, it's the same as to renew a registration that has not expired. Essentially, you fill out a renewal form, you pay a renewal fee, notify the board of any convictions or disciplinary action that has been taken, and you participate in the California Law and Ethics exam if applicable. So that's the first part of this proposal. We are also making an additional amendment in this legislative proposal to Business and Professions Code 4996.28 for social workers. The law is a little bit different for social workers than it is for the other two. The statutes don't exactly match, and there is an error in the social worker statute. Currently, it states that to renew a registration, the registrant must obtain a passing score on the California Law and Ethics exam. That is incorrect. It's not the intent of the exam restructure. it should state that to renew a registration, the registrant must participate in the California Law and Ethics exam each year. And then later on, it should say that to get a subsequent registration number or a license, they have to have passed the Law and Ethics exam. So we're revising subsections A and C of this section, 4996.28. And also adding just another sentence about renewal after 6 years to be consistent with LMFT and LPCC law.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes, I have a question, concern. So I'm wondering, because it only says participate, would that include someone who actually began the test and for whatever reason, maybe something beyond their control, they actually had to leave in the middle of the test and did not complete it? So that's my one question, and I'm wondering if that is the case, would it be appropriate to say participate and obtain a score? Just to clarify that you can't just go in and start the test and then walk out because you're frustrated or there's an emergency. You actually have to finish it and get a score.
That's a really interesting distinction.
Well, they would have a score even if they don't finish the test.
Yeah.
It would be a failed
Right.
score.
Once you start.
Yeah, once you start a test,
Mhm.
you're considered to
You-
have set for the test because you've been exposed to the questions.
And so you may get an extremely low score if you
Correct.
leave, but you will get a score nevertheless.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, that's very good. So to response, I think participate works
Based on the process that exists.
based on the process, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Anyone from the public? Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Leah?
after they're done.
No, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had a question. I'm
No,
sorry.
I can make a motion.
Anyone from the public want to comment on this? Okay.
And just one thing, I'm sorry. And we're clear, I mean, we're pretty sure that you do get some sort of score.
Yeah, she
Yes.
did.
Oh, yeah.
It's either no show or a score.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to direct staff to make any discussed changes and non-substantive changes to pursue as legislative proposal.
I'll second it.
Okay, Renee seconds. Any discussion? Christina?
Renee Lauder.
Yes.
Dr. Christine Witherspoon.
Yes.
Jonathan Maddox.
Yes.
Max Fiscal.
Yes.
Samara Ashley.
Yes.
Deborah Brown.
Yes.
Betty Conley.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Aye.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Sarita Kohli.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Roseanne?
Actually, I think the next is, Christie's next.
Yes, thank you. So this, we're going to discuss examination rescoring and looking at a possible regulation change. Currently, our statute allows the board to charge candidates $20 to rescore an exam. The fee is also listed in our regulations, but none of our laws define what examination rescoring means. It really has its root in the past when exams were given paper and pencil. And so the purpose was to hand check for errors on a Scantron. Now that all of our exams are administered electronically, the exam results for every candidate are automatically double-checked by the exam vendor. So paying a $20 fee for rescoring offers no benefit to a candidate, but with a caveat that some candidates are provided with paper and pencil tests as an accommodation for a disability or medical condition. Currently what we have is an application on our website that if you had a paper and pencil exam, you can pay the $20 fee and get your exam hand scored. If you are a candidate who took it electronically, you can let us know that you have concerns and we'll investigate that. We don't charge a fee for that. So basically what we want to do is propose a regulation that says if your exam was given paper and pencil, you can pay the $20 fee and it will be hand scored. The other proposal would be to strike the fee in the regulation because the fee is actually set in the statutes. There's no need for the duplication. And that's really that.
Okay. Any questions?
Just from my understanding, so how many people are actually asking for rescoring?
Oh.
Many? All of them?
We had a
We had a
influx.
flood last summer, last year. Just a flood. Everybody, I just missed the example at one point they need to rescore. And it would be all, and it was all the electronically administered exams before the score is released, if you're taking it via computer, before that score is released to the candidate, the computer actually rescores it twice. So they would because they would send in the app and with the fee, I'm essentially taking money that I know is not going to yield any different result, and it felt just wrong. We charge so many fees for different things that to charge a fee when I know that the outcome was not going to change on a computer administered exam, it just seemed criminal to me. So we just, as a policy within the office, opted not to accept those anymore and only allow the paper and pencil exams to move forward. And when people would call to complain, I would explain to them the process of what happens with the computer-based exam and the request to rescore. I just don't want to take their money. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. I had a real moral problem with it, so that's what we're trying to do here is get more specific, because I think that there is still value. If you had a paper pencil exam, perhaps there could have been an error. So
Right.
That's what I want to rescore, and that fee seems appropriate.
Right. What you're trying to say also, it's pretty much it shuts down those hopes that perhaps something went wrong in the process, and that's why I failed and things like that, so that we don't. Okay.
It also answers the question that I heard. I think one of the questions was wrong on the exam. I want them to look at it because we heard before that some questions were thrown out. I want to make sure that didn't happen on my exam. But, questions that we removed from scoring on an exam are already done. And if there is an egregious error, then we notify those candidates. But, if we see an exam's not performing well during that administration, we just don't score. And everybody is
Applicable to everybody.
It's right. It's across the board.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so is that why we need the regulation to clarify some of these issues? Because if it's already in statute, then it's.
The only thing that's in our statutes or regulations is that there's a fee for examination rescoring. That's all it says.
And so we need the regulation to define what the
So
rescore
you
is
want,
for.
right?
Yeah.
Because one of the options was not to have one, but you would like one.
Yes, I think so. Because then it's abundantly clear.
Okay.
that it's for paper pencil
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
So I'm in agreement. I think what we're proposing makes perfect sense. I actually had just another question about the process. So was there any sort of notification that was sent out to stakeholders and pre-licensees about that reality so that they are aware? I don't know if there's a link on the website or is it in the FAQs or something?
We did a notice. We advised that after X day, we would not process any requests to rescore an exam that was administered via computer.
Sure.
So, but we would still continue to take the paper and pencil requests.
Okay, so that's helpful to know, but I think, and maybe I didn't ask it properly, the explanation underpinning that decision, is that somewhere where somebody can read it and say, okay, now I know why this doesn't make sense because it's been scored twice? I mean, because I think it's helpful for someone to know that it's being scored 3 times. If they,
In the newsletter.
they can put it in the newsletter or just send it out.
Honestly, Jonathan, I don't recall if we did or we didn't. I know that I had lots of conversations with people,
Sure,
especially the associations about it.
sure.
And I don't recall if we did anything in the newsletter.
No,
We certainly
actually,
can.
I was gonna say, maybe we could clarify whether we did,
Right.
and I think more information is always helpful.
Oh,
That seems relevant.
yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And this application, the revision date will be updated as well?
Yes.
All right.
Is there a motion? Need a motion? Public comment. Oh, public, I'm sorry, public comment? Okay.
Well, no, you need your fancy, you need your, this is a regulatory proposal, correct?
Right.
So that your motion would be to approve the proposed text for a 45-day public comment period and to delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed changes if no adverse comments are received and to make any technical non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
So I will make the motion you just said.
Betty just seconded. Is there a second?
Betty just said.
Betty? Discussion? Christina?
Renee
Yes.
Bonner? Dr. Christine Willisville?
Yes.
Jonathan Madden?
Yes.
Max Discoski?
Yes.
Samara Ashley?
Yes.
Deborah Brown.
Yes.
Betty Conley.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Shu.
Aye.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Sarita Kohli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, Christy?
Okay, so our next discussion, it has to do with considering potential regulation change for our application abandonment criteria. Abandonment, when it pertains to an application, is a situation where an applicant hasn't taken some sort of action on their application for at least a one-year period. So at the one-year mark, if there's been no activity, the file is closed and they have to reapply and requalify if they wish to pursue registration or licensure. So right now, our current regulations specify those circumstances. So I'll just go over those briefly. Where you haven't, someone who submitted an application but they haven't completed it within 1 year. Something's missing. Or they submit an application and we send them a deficiency notice and they don't clear up those deficiencies within 1 year. And there is some overlap between those two things that I just said. So one thing the regulation is doing is combining that into one statement. The other way your application can get abandoned is if you don't take an exam within a 1 year period of being notified you're eligible, or within a 1 year period of failing your last exam. And this is not talking about the law and ethics people, registrants. We're talking about people who have submitted their hours. So they're in sort of a holding pattern, their application's pending while they're trying to pass their exam. So if you do not take an exam within 1 year of either being notified you're eligible or within 1 year of failing your exam. The other way would be is if you pass the law and ethics but not the clinical. But that's, again, people who have submitted their hours. So there's that. And the last way that your application can be abandoned is if you pass your clinical and you don't pay your initial license fee within 1 year. So if your application is abandoned, you have to submit a new application and fees and meet current requirements if you wish to pursue. Depending on how long that takes, they may not have to resubmit all the documentation. We determine that case by case. So the proposed changes would, like I said, one of the things was to combine those two statements about applications, completion of application, into one statement. It's just a little bit clearer. We also want to move the text that's at the very bottom of the regulation right now that talks about the repercussions of abandonment to the very top, just to try to bring a little more awareness, because sometimes you have people, they don't take their exam within that 1 year period and they have to resubmit their hours. Well, your hours have to be 6 years old or less. So people do lose hours that way. And that's something we've tried to do a lot of outreach on and emphasize, but it still happens. The other thing that we've done is we had a lot of separate statements about if you don't pass this exam, within a year. We kind of had it really broken down, and that kind of caused some confusion for people reading it. So we made that all into one statement about how you maintain an active licensure application once you've submitted your hours and are in the exam process. So that's what we're trying to do there.
Any questions? Anyone from the public? You have a question?
I have a question just for my own education. And I don't know if this is the actual form to do it. I'm wondering about the fails to pay the initial license fee within 1 year after passing the exam. That means they're basically licensed, they just haven't paid. I was wondering how do we...
The next, if you pass the exam, which means you qualify to apply for the license, but you still need to send in the application and the fee. And I know of 2 occasions where that has not happened.
Okay, so it happens very rarely.
It's rare, and yeah, and I think one of them actually waited 2 years. Yeah, that's kind of, I don't have an explanation for that because I can tell you if it was me, but the next check I would write would be for that license. So, because I worked so hard to get to it, but it's happened.
We have further discussion? Questions? Okay, Christina?
And then
we
need
need
a
motion.
Need a motion.
I'll do it.
Okay, right. Christine's made a motion and we're gonna see what that is.
It's already written.
Look, she just opens her magic book and she has a
I like the magic book.
So, the motion is going to be that we approve the proposed text for a 45-day public comment period and delegate to the executive officer the authority any technical and non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
So moved.
One second.
Sarita. Good motion, Christine.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, now Christina.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Christine Whitliswell?
Yes.
Jonathan Madden?
Yes.
Max Disposal?
Yes.
Samara Ashley?
Yes.
Deborah Brown?
Yes.
Betty Conley?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Aye.
Dr. Leah Brew?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Sarita Kohli?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and we have removed to F, so we're moving on to G, Chrissy, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a pretty simple regulation change, but a little complicated how to explain it. What we need to do is add a fee so that for people applying for a subsequent professional clinical counselor intern registration, or associate, I should say. The very first PCCI registrations were issued in January 2011, so those are going to soon reach their 6-year maximum. And when we were working to create the application form for that, that we want to release soon, we found that the fee, in statute, it sets the maximum fee. And a lot of in statute, it does that. Sometimes it specifies the actual fee, sometimes it sets the maximum, which then means you have to specify the actual in the regulations. So if the statute says this is the maximum, we have to say what the actual one is in the regs. So the maximum fee is $150, and then the regulations specify that the actual fee is $100, but the way it's worded is it's for a PCCI initial application. So this regulation change would clarify that it is for both an initial or subsequent PCCI application. So that's basically that.
Any questions? Hang on. Yeah, this wasn't clear to me when I read through this. Okay, so looking at the attachment of the proposed language. So are we just making the change for E?
Just E is changing, and we're basically taking out the word initial application. Because it could be your, it may not be your, it would just be much clearer to say and this is how it is for the other professions, is that an application for an associate registration is this fee.
So I think the thing that's confusing for me is that the A through D are all for a license.
Right.
And what about the registration for the other?
So for the other professions, it's set in statute. So,
and we don't want to put this in statute like the other professions?
It would take much longer I don't know that it would take longer.
It's
The
a
regulation.
more complicated process, because if you're running legislation, they could say no, and then I don't have a way to offer a subsequent registration.
And fees in legislation can be tricky too, politically.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And I'm just noting how diverse the fees are from $80 to $200.
Yes, I know.
Mm-hmm.
So noted.
Yes, but, okay, so that makes sense to me.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, anybody from the public have a question? All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we're in the motion.
I-
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you have to read your.
Oh. All right.
He's not sure he wants to second it yet.
Move that we approve the proposed text for a 45-day public comment period and delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed regulatory changes if there are no adverse comments received, and to make any technical and non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
So moved.
You feel comfortable now? I second that.
You'll second that?
Yes.
Now that you've heard it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Informed consent.
Any discussion? All right, Christina?
Renee Launer?
Yes.
Dr. Christine Whitliswell?
Yes.
Jonathan Madden?
Yes.
Max Disposal?
Yes.
Samara Ashley?
Yes.
Deborah Brown?
Yes.
Betty Conley?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Aye.
Dr. Leah Brew?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Sarita Kohli?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Roseanne, and you're going to give a status on the monitored legislation.
Okay, so the 2016-17 legislative session is now complete. So just kind of a status quo on some significant bills of note. The board sponsored 2 legislative proposals. AB 93, which is now a 2-year bill, will be bringing some revised language based on our October policy and advocacy meeting back to, first it'll go to the February policy and advocacy committee meeting, and then it will go to the February board meeting for review. And then our other bill was the omnibus bill this year, SB 800. That bill was signed by the governor. We had AB 1188. That is the bill that was regarding health professions development fee and the loan repayment grant program. So right now, our licensee LMFT and LPCC LMFT and LCSW licensees pay a $10 fee that goes to the Mental Health Practitioner Education Fund that allows licensees and registrants to apply for a loan repayment grant if they work in a professional shortage area. So the fee for this bill is increasing from $10 to $20 for LMFTs and LCSWs. It would add the $20 fee for LPCCs and allow them to participate in the loan repayment grant competitive program as well. So that bill is going into effect. It's as of July 1, 2018. We asked for a little bit of a delayed implementation to do some behind the scenes setting up. So AB 1591, which was adding LPCCs to the reimbursement for Medi-Cal federally qualified health centers and rural health clinics, was actually vetoed by the governor this year. So that bill will not be moving forward this year. And then also of note, AB 89 was signed by the governor. That bill does not apply to this board, but it applies to the psychology board, and it requires, beginning January 1, 2020, psychologists to demonstrate upon either renewal of license or application for licensure that they have at least 6 hours of coursework or supervised experience in suicide risk assessment and intervention. So that's the significant legislation, and the other bills that the board tracked or took positions on are also listed in this document.
Are there any questions of Roseanne? Okay. Does anybody from the public want to talk about one of these bills? If you could reference the bill.
Oh, of course. Kathy Atkins from CAMP. I just wanted to quickly stress my extreme concerns about the Policy and Advocacy Committee's decision to sunset the 90-day rule. I know this won't come before you until February. I look forward to working with Kim and Roseanne, who have been wonderful to date on this very complicated issue, so I thank them both for their hard work, but I am very concerned about what the committee decided. So we will continue to work with Kim and Roseanne, but I did want to, I can't underscore enough my concerns about potential unintended consequences for consumer protection as well as exploitation of pre-licensees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why? Okay, no, now.
Yeah. Ben?
Ben Caldwell, AMFT California. I really just want to support everything that Kathy just said. We share all of those concerns.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Input? Okay, Christy?
Okay, so this is the status of our rulemaking proposals or regulatory changes. As was mentioned earlier, our English as a second language testing accommodations regulations took effect October 1st, and the application was designed and made available immediately as of, October 2nd, which isn't the Monday. So, and we've been getting lots of applicants from what I hear from staff. Our other current regulatory proposals are in various stages of the process. Our first one is on the chart that talked about application processing times, and it's combined with another proposal regarding registrant advertising related to the use of intern versus associate. So that is right now under review by the Department of Consumer Affairs as part of the final phase of the regulation process. Once they complete their review, it'll go to OAL and we're hoping it'll take effect by this coming January 1st to coincide with the intern to associate taking effect, because it's important that advertising matches up with the new names. The next regulation package has to do with there's kind of a combination here as well, requiring all registrants and licensees to maintain a current confidential telephone number and email address with the board if they have one. And then it would also set forth a lot of things that we already do, like stating that to prove that you meet our educational requirements, you have to submit a transcript. Right now, our law doesn't say you have to submit a transcript, but that's just logically how we've always done it. But we've been informed that we really should set those things out in our law. So it contains a lot of application requirements that we're just laying those out. It's going to require certain applications and forms to be signed under penalty of perjury. We were really careful about how we went through that process in deciding which ones should require that. And then the other thing that this does is provides the board staff with some procedures when an individual supervisor is either deceased or is incapacitated to the point where they can't sign for hours. So that one is in the initial review phase, which is the newer process that DCA has implemented. And I just got that one back, and so we'll be submitting that to OAL for publishing to start the 45-day public comment period. The last reg proposal that we have in process is pertaining to enforcement and updates in the disciplinary process, and it's also making some updates to the uniform standards. And this was also in the new initial review phase by DCA, and so that's one that I'm waiting to hear back on from DCA.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Status update? Okay, moving on to suggestions for future agenda items. Board members, anyone? Okay. Any members of the public? Okay. Moving on, public comment for items not on the agenda. Anybody from the public want to comment? Okay. All right, it is 1:28 and the 12. Oh, sorry. 12:28. It is 12:28 and the Board of Behavioral Sciences is adjourned.
Good job.